Hey guys, it's Jack. I want to tell you guys about the sponsor for today's show. It's Mando. Mando makes a whole series of male grooming products. They are unique in that they are a deodorant that you can use all over your body, on armpits if you like, but also wherever else you may deem necessary. And I have been using these products for about 3 months now. I've been using the body wash. It's bourbon leather. I've been using their bar of soap, which I really enjoyed, and also their deodorant. And so I exercise a lot and get very sweaty, so I need a deodorant that's going to do the job. And Mando has come through for me. You know, the body wash was great. I actually used all of that. Need to reorder some more. But the bar of soap was also very cool. It was very smooth, actually. So I hope you guys will go and check them out. They have a starter kit that's up there, and they have a special deal for Team House viewers. So the starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice, like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. As a special offer for listeners, new customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That equates to over 40% off your starter pack. Use code TEAMHOUSE at shopmando.com. That's shopmando.com. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Smell fresher, stay drier, and boost your confidence from head to toe with Mando.
A lot of people put off buying a new mattress because it feels like a hassle. Too many options, too many claims, and no real way to tell what's actually going to hold up. GhostBed makes that decision easier. GhostBed is a family-run company with more than 20 years of mattress-making experience backed by deep manufacturing expertise. Their approach is straightforward. Focus on quality materials, smart construction, and a consistency over time, not flashy features or complicated sales tactics. Every GhostBed mattress is built for long-term comfort using durable foam and proven cooling technology to help regulate temperature while you sleep. It's designed to feel reliable night after night, not just when it's brand new. And if you're not sure which mattress is right for you, GhostBed's online mattress quiz helps narrow it down quickly. Whether you're a side sleeper who needs a little plushness or someone who prefers a firmer feel, the quiz matches you with the right option based on how you actually sleep. They also keep pricing grounded. GhostBed mattresses cost up to 50% less than comparable brands. You could rest easy knowing you're getting one of the best values at this quality level. Every mattress comes with a 101-night sleep trial, an industry-leading warranty, and fast free shipping. And as a Team House listener, you can get an extra 10% off your order. Just go to ghostbed.com/house and use the promo code HOUSE at checkout. That's ghostbed.com/house, code HOUSE for an additional 10% off site-wide. Upgrade your sleep with GhostBed, makers of the coolest beds in the world. Some exclusions apply. See site for details. Thank you, GhostBed, for sponsoring the show. Thank you guys for helping support the show. Bye.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 403 of the Team House. I'm Jack Murphy with tonight's guest on the show, Josh Bates. He's the author of The Baghdad Shuffle. It is a novel. We'll get into it. Largely, or I shouldn't say largely, but I mean, his military experience bleeds into it quite a bit. Josh served in the Marine infantry and then as a military intelligence officer, and then went on to become a counterintelligence guy. Did his 20 years and retired back in 2022, and penned this novel, which, I mean, it's like a noir, really. It's a war story, but it's also a sort of murder mystery in a sense. Told through the perspective of a 26-year-old Marine and everything that entails, you know, coming out of the invasion of Iraq. So yeah, I really love this book, but we'll get into it in a bit. Josh, thanks for joining us on the show today.
Yeah, Jack, thanks, man. Thanks for having me on. Glad to be here.
So yeah, start at the beginning, Josh. Tell us a little bit about your origin. How did you grow up? I know you grew up in Hawaii, right? Your dad's a military or a Marine veteran.
Yeah. So I was actually born in Camp Pendleton Naval Hospital. So kind of born into the gig, as it were. My dad had been an enlisted guy. He was a machine gunner in Vietnam and then was wounded a bunch and was out for about 7-8 years. So by the time he met my mom, got married, had me, he'd come back in as an officer finally. So stationed at Camp Pendleton. So that's where I was born. But I actually grew up mostly here. Like I say, he was pretty good at Homestead. And so he was in 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines, 2-3, the regiment, all these units that are here on Oahu. So I did most of my formative years here, which was, didn't suck.
Yeah,
And
I
I
mean,
was, fortunate enough to work my bolt to where I was able to come back. And I was joking with you before we started recording, but one of my greatest professional achievements was doing my last like almost 8 years on active duty on Oahu, which is really hard to do. But my wife was still on active duty in the Navy. She retired from the Navy, she's a Navy nurse, and so I was able to kind of like leverage that a little bit as well because we, dual military family deal. So yeah, so
yeah.
that's
So mom and dad were both in the military.
yeah, not my mom. No,
Oh.
yeah, my mom is a early childhood educator, teacher, principal.
Oh,
That
cool. Okay.
education side of the house. Yeah, but so Pops was in the Marine Corps all the way up until, in fact, we were actually in Iraq together, which is hilarious. Like, I this is again back in the Wild West days. Not to get ahead of the story, but we had already my battalion, First Battalion, 7th Marines, had already moved back down to Najaf out of Baghdad. This is in like summer of 03. And my dad was on the 1st Marine Division staff in Babylon. And then like he shows up down there one day and he's like, oh, hey, but I need a ride back. So just like, hop in the gun truck, drove him from Najaf back to Babylon. No, I don't even think we had like radio comms with battalion or anything. It was just back then when you could do all that. This was before all the like the IED threat and all that craziness. And when they're very, very, very permissive ROE for engaging anybody that wanted to dance. So, but anyway, yeah. So, grew up mostly here in Hawaii, and then found out about this thing like my junior, senior year of high school about the Naval Reserve Officer Training Corps, that they provide like full scholarships, and then you get back. So I was kind of already planning on going to the Marines anyway. So was able to land one of those. And like I was telling everybody, I think it's a lot of it is when you come out of Hawaii, like you're in that, you're kind of geographically lumped with the kids that are applying for those scholarships from like here, Okinawa, Guam. So it's not super competitive, right? Like there's not a lot of people applying for. And plus it was like in the mid 90s, like no one was going into the military at that time. They think they're going to make like $1 million in like the .com boom or whatever. So timing worked out well. Got the scholarship, went to University of San Diego, which also did not suck, and then got commissioned out of there as an infantry guy.
Awesome. And so what do you have to go to, like is there like a basic infantry course that they put the officers through?
Yeah, so we go officer candidate school, and then all Marines, regardless of MOS, all officers go to the basic school. And then after the basic school, you go to infantry officers course, which is a really, really great course. And we actually started, just the way mine worked out, like we actually started IOC, infantry officers course, before we had graduated TBS. So we were kind of doing both there for a few weeks and then transitioned in. But that was a great experience. I mean, I think, the training budget for that course is probably equivalent to like what most Victor unit, like what most line battalions would get for like a year when it comes to like ammo and all that. So, but they really stress like all the it's like graduate level kind of, combined arms stuff. So yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
Demanding, like super physically demanding, but good. Yeah.
And what year was that you went through the course?
In 2000. So I got commissioned in 2000. I went to IOC in the summer of 2001. By the time I finished up my. Yeah.
Okay, man. So you're coming right into it when 9/11 happens.
Yeah. So I was actually on leave out here in Hawaii, surfing, hanging out, having a great time. After IOC and before I had actually checked into 17 into 1st Battalion, 7th Marines. So I was on my like post IOC leave. When it hit, and then then I couldn't fly out of here because like all the air traffic shut down. Yeah. So I had to like actually beg my XO to like extend my leave before I could report in. But finally that happened, and we went, and then I showed up there. We went to it was in 29 Palms, California. That's where 17. So just south of Fort Irwin there, like in out in the desert in the Mojave. Great place to train. So like that's all we did. I was joking like I had a house in 29 Palms, but I should have just had like my mail forwarded out to the field to like Rainbow Canyon, because like we were always in the field, which was great because you can do all kinds of crazy combined arms stuff out there, which we actually used, during OIF-1 during the invasion, when we were kind of a more conventional fight there for a few months. So that was good. And then, so we did the combined arms exercise stuff, did all that. And then we went on in early 2002, we went on a unit deployment program out to Okinawa. And then, Korea, some of the guys went to Thailand, everywhere else. And that was great because by the time we got back, we had just enough kind of time to, clean weapons, do all your admin stuff. And then we pumped back out to Kuwait to wait for the invasion, like in January of 2003 or something. So we had a really tight, cohesive unit, that battalion had been working together for about a year and a half, pretty much straight with like the same folks, like kind of in the same billets and everything. So that was really good. And that's when I bumped up from a rifle platoon up to be the combined arms anti-tank platoon commander. So the CAT platoon commander, which is, essentially it's 8 gun trucks, a mix of tow missiles and heavy machine guns, so 50 caliber Mark 19s, which was probably the best job in the Marine Corps when the invasion kicked off, because again, operating well forward of the battalion, again, not a lot of adult supervision, permissive ROE, and lots of heavy, we were heavily armed. So that was good. And we were actually, like fighting, like the very first day of the war kicks off, and we were tasked with basically seizing this gas oil separation platform down in Azerbaijan, which is like right west of Basra. So like southern Iraq. They were worried they were going to sabotage it, kind of like they did back, 91. So we go rolling in there, and we were actually like, it was the Iraqi 51st Mechanized Division. So it was like, shooting dudes that were actually wearing camis and and there's tanks and shit out there. So like it was, it was kind of like what everything in my Marine Corps training and stuff had prepared me for like real conventional combined arms war, like actually kind of happened. They was like no plan survives first contact, and it's like that one kind of did, for like the first day or so, which was pretty kind of, I think, shocked us all, but it was good. We felt prepared.
Yeah. So I mean, let's just roll right into it then. I mean, what was it like rolling up on this gas terminal and having to take it over? And you're it's still a young officer, first taste of combat.
Yeah. So we were literally in my CAT platoon. We're kind of double as like a motorized reconnaissance people. So we were literally like the lead element of like the entire division as we were heading up there. And I remember like the Harriers were supposed to do a flyby and tell us if like some of the burn off flares were still, if they could see them or not, because they were worried if they were turned off, that meant, hey, they're going to blow this thing, as we go through or whatever. And I think they were turned off, but it was just like, well, shit, we got to go anyway. We're going to do it. I don't even know if we ever got the word, actually. I'm trying to remember if we even knew what they saw, but we rolled up there. But the funniest thing in the Ox character in the book, which we'll talk about later, he's partially based on my gunner that was in my truck, who was just an absolute like surgeon with all heavy machine guns, right? But we had spent months prepping for this, where we had like oil engineers in California and some down in Kuwait, some of the British guys and stuff that had built, their company had built like that gas oil separation platform 60 years before or whatever. And so they had given us all these lectures like, hey, whatever you do, there's this one feeder pipe that's about, 8-10 inches in diameter. It sits maybe like 4 feet off the ground. Like, you can shoot a lot of this stuff. Do not shoot that. Do not shoot that. So what happens? Literally very first rounds of the war, we see a kind of a late model like Toyota Land Cruiser leave like the facility, and then they see us and U-turn. Obviously it's regime dudes, right? Like they're the only ones that are driving around in late model cruisers. So I'm tapping my gunner on the late, he lights them up with the Mark 19, but one of the 40 Mike grenades, like, we got so close to it that it like hit the back bumper, takes a hard right turn, like 90 degrees almost. And what does it hit? That tiny ass little feeder line. And I mean, it was like a mushroom cloud, like, went up. So I hear over battalion tack, they're like, Cat Red, that was the call. Oh, Cat Red's gone. Like, they just got smoked by like a T-72 or something. They didn't, it was crazy. So yeah, literally we had one job, like, do not shoot that thing. And then very, very first burst of the round takes out that feeder line. So that was a good inauspicious start to the war for us. but he did dump, Bear, my gunner, he did dump those guys in the Land Cruiser though. So that was a win.
And so you guys
first confirmed kills of the
you guys did seize that gas terminal, and then you're like waiting for follow-on forces, I guess.
Yeah, we did. So, and then we kind of pushed through like the town of Azerbaijan, which is not real big, but there was like a bath party, like, substation, subordinate headquarters and stuff down there. Took all that, and then the next day we've been kind of in a bunch of gunfights in the built up area of it, which again it's not like a huge metropolis or anything. It's like way on the outskirts of Basra, but there's like kind of mid-rise apartment buildings and stuff, like fighting through all that. That was the first time, like, so I guess it was the second day of the war. It was the first time we saw like the quote unquote Saddam Fedayeen guys, like in their black jammies out there. Cause mostly up until that, that whole first day, it was dudes that were still like they weren't camis. They were like the green sateen, the Iraqi army guys.
Yeah. The conscripts.
Right. But so the first day we had someone in civvy shooting at us, I guess was like the second day of the war as we pushed through there. But then, yeah, so we seized it and we pushed out to kind of our limit of advance. And then the Brits came with I guess with the Chieftain tanks. It was like one of their armored units came through, did a forward passage of lines with us. And then they rolled all the way into Basra, which, as you guys know, they kind of stayed there for the duration. So, and then, and then we just went back out to Route 1 and headed north all the way to Baghdad.
Wow.
For the next couple of weeks.
What was that trip like? And also, how did you guys, like, logistically, how was this done? Did you guys did they set up like fuel? I'm just kind of curious in my own mind how you guys managed all that.
Like full Mad Max, like our Lagos, good on them. Cause like, they were jacking like Iraqi, like civilian fuel tankers and stuff like that. Just anything to get their hands on. And honestly, I don't know. Like, we always were able to get more fuel. And we had like, it was kind of Beverly Hillbilly style. We had all the stuff stacked on top, all the jerry cans and whatnot. So we had a lot kind of we could carry organically. But when I think back at that and I think about like the kind of the time distance, like how much, ground we were recovering and stuff, we obviously re-upped on fuel and ammo and they always got it to us. I remember one time, this was probably I think it was like northwest of Nasiriyah, and like C-130s like landing on like, dirt strips and stuff and just kicking out pallets of gear and stuff in the back and resupply. So, hats off to the log folks that made that happen. Cause I don't remember us ever really being short of anything, all the way up until, except for maybe, I think the 81s guys, like the mortar rounds and stuff. I think that may have been like one of the few things that some of them ran out of, but, So it was kind of like an ad hoc. A lot of the stuff was on the fly. A lot of it was kind of behind the green door, as far as I was concerned. I didn't really know. It's all magic how they're making it work, but they did. Yeah. So it was. Good on them.
Did you guys get ambushed or anything on the way up to Baghdad?
Oh yeah. I would say probably almost every day. I think there was some sort of drama because again we were pushed way ahead of our battalion because they were all in tracks, right? So they're in the Amtrak, like in the AAVs. So us and Humvees are going way faster to the point where like even some of the stuff that I never thought I would, doing like field expedient, like HF comm shots to talk back, doing that stuff because we were like so far ahead of like where the battalion, they just couldn't keep up. But yeah. So there was, I would say maybe not daily, but like quite a few on the way up there. And then we hit the big Shamal came through when we were still well south of Baghdad, that big sandstorm that kind of ground everything down for about a day, for about 24 hours. And that was really eerie because it's like, you could barely see like 2 feet out of the truck at that point. And just kind of waiting, like when this thing clears, like, are we going to have like a wall of Special Republican Guard guys like right in front of us or, how is this going to, but fortunately we didn't, it affected them as well. So we went on, pushed all the way up. And then right when we got to the Diyala River there on the south side of Baghdad, that's when things really started kind of heating up. So again, it was still kind of like a combined arms fight at that point. Like we had a frog, like the free range over ground missile come like tumbling through the Iraqi shot at us, like, mortar rounds, everything. We were still calling in artillery on positions and stuff. So it was kind of, what my being trained is like, that's my concept of like what combined arms war looks like. That actually happened all the way until we got inside Baghdad in like that first week of April or whatever. And then it became kind of more of like a heavy policing action. But
what happened that day that you guys hit Baghdad and what was the plan, if any?
So like looking back and I'm trying to remember, I know we were supposed to seize, we got to Tariq Aziz's house and literally must have just barely missed that bastard. Cause I remember like there was still like, food that was not hadn't like,
the
maggots or mold or anything. Out. Like he had just left. Right. His collection of like soft porn DVDs still scattered across the thing. But, so we hit that house that like there was that neighborhood there on the Tigris where a lot of the regime heavies lived. And that was kind of our first objective. But then we pushed past that into where Baghdad University was. And then that's right along the river there, it goes over like as if you're going out towards the airport, towards Baghdad International. And that was a hilarious one. So we got ambushed on that going over that bridge, and then the guys that ambushed us jumped into like it's like a houseboat on the river. So it's not like a cigarette boat or somewhere they can speed away. So it's just like not a good plan on their part. So those dudes ate a bunch of 40 Mike, and then we had a detachment from First Tanks with us. In the M1s, that like those guys killed more Iraqis than cancer. Like those first couple of days in Baghdad, Baghdad University had this big, it was probably like 15-story. I guess it was dorms essentially, like or some sort of maybe administrative building or something. But it was like one of the taller buildings in Baghdad, at least in that section of the city. And it was guys again, like not a good plan, but shooting. Light machine guns and small arms from like the 15th floor down to where the M1s would just roll up to the bottom, like Stalingrad style, raise the main gun, and just putting like impact rounds right through it. So, but all that calmed down, I would say, within about 2 or 3 days. And again, this was still all the peace love, yanking down the statues. It's like all the Shia folks coming out.
These are like legit, Saddam regime dudes that are fighting you at this point.
Yeah, totally. So that was, we had people coming up and thanking us all the time, like in the streets, and then, and then as everyone knows, we kind of wore out that welcome. But yeah, so for the first few days, and then I would say, I think it was maybe like the end of that first week is when like all the real heavy looting started, right?
Yeah.
So again, that was to include that bank that was kind of in our zone of responsibility there in central Baghdad that got hit.
The museum was the one that captured the media's attention. I remember the like Iraqi National Museum getting looted.
It was
all
crazy
over TV.
And the logistical capability of those guys to loot that stuff was like super. I mean, it made the like LA riots look like nothing. Like how it was like almost like NASCAR pit crew style, like come in and just strip a place completely to include like the light switches and the wiring and stuff. I mean,
poverty will do that. Yeah, poverty will do that to those folks.
Big time.
So tell us about the bank robbery.
Yeah, so we were on patrol. Like I said, it was kind of every day there for about a week or 2 weeks. Kind of after everything settled down in Baghdad, it was like every day was kind of like a bad day at cops. Like you just didn't know what was going to happen. So we had teamed up with these Iraqi policemen. I think Captain Ahmed was his name, and then 2 of his subordinates. And of course, never vetted these guys.
Yeah, no, that's I was gonna ask that. That just like came together organically. You bumped into him in the streets, like, hey, bro.
Literally bumped into him in the streets, and then they asked us. They're like, hey, we know, basically we got some. There was some broken ink. We didn't have interps with us or nothing. So like, but their head guy, the captain, kind of had some functional English. So he's like, a lot of drama going down here. We just don't really have the ass to like get after it. Will you guys help us? Because of people being victimized, like all like a bunch of people settling blood feuds and the looting and everything else. We're like, yeah, man, we got nothing else on on the schedule. Like we're just kind of patrolling indefinitely. So like, let's do this. So we teamed up with those guys, and they clued us into a few things. And then I think it was actually the day after we kind of lost contact with them, is we were patrolling by this bank there, kind of like in central Baghdad, and all kinds of chaos, people screaming. You could smell smoke and fires and stuff running over. And these dudes had tried to breach the bank with RPGs to get in, and I don't think they ever actually got into the vault or whatever. But getting a gunfight there, shooting those guys, chasing them away. And that was just kind of the first time where it really clicked in my mind of like, wow, the combat zones are super fertile ground for crime, right? Of all kinds. Yeah. And then that was, so later on, writing Baghdad Shuffle, that bank robbery was some of the cash that the regime was not able to get like out of the country in time. And how that would inspire a lot of guys to go to some pretty extreme measures, to get their hands on that.
Yeah, I mean, breaching a bank with RPGs, as one does.
Yep. It was wild. That was and that was another one. And again, like the photo on the cover of Baghdad Shuffle, I think it was either that day of the bank or maybe right after when we had like yanked down some of those guys that we thought may have been responsible for it, the ones that are sitting flexi-cuffed in the back. But and then when I look at that, I think about like, holy shit, like I had a 9mm I forgot about that. Like going back, I didn't even have a rifle. Like I mean, of course we had, heavy guns on the truck and stuff, but there I'm running through the streets of Baghdad with the Neener, just with guys. They're going up against dudes with RPGs and stuff. But yeah, it's just things that you don't think about at the time.
They just didn't have enough rifles to go around.
We must have. I honestly, to this day, like I think what had happened was I ended up using our Ford Observer. He was artillery. He was actually still a PFC, I think. He had just come from dude was still, shit in Camp Pendleton child when he joined us in country. And he was our Ford Observer and he had an M16. So it was way before, the Victor units were getting issued M4s. So we had the M16 in the truck. And of course, the mount is weird. It's kind of cumbersome or whatever.
Yeah.
I did keep that one on my side, on the passenger side sometimes. And I used that I used his rifle a few times. But I guess just because the vehicle commanders got, you get issued the 9mm. And so, that was, So I'm sure we had the rifles available, but for whatever reason, for logistically of stacking them in the truck and everything, or thinking I wasn't going to be
engaging
outside the vehicle as much, which in this downtown Baghdad, you're out of it quite a bit. So.
What's up, guys? I want to thank Blue Chew for sponsoring our video. Fellas, you already know what time it is. It's time to level up, and Blue Chew just dropped something crazy. I'm talking next level, championship belt, gold-plated energy. Blue Chew Gold is the newest innovation from the #1 chewable ED brand. This isn't your grandpa's little blue pill. This is a 4-in-1 beast that's setting the gold standard for performance. We're talking 2 ingredients for blood flow and to keep that rocket pumping. Mixed with apomorphine and oxytocin to turn up arousal and connection in your brain and body. Blue Chew Gold dissolves under your tongue and works in as little as 15 minutes. That means you can get it on quicker and stay in the game longer. Elevation without hesitation. This is peak passion and peak performance in a single tablet. So the next time your girl hits you up saying you up, asking to see where you're at, just shoot her a picture of your piece and a Blue Chew tablet, and she'll know what's up. She'll be ready to rock. Make life easier by getting harder and discover your options at BlueChew.com. We got a special offer for our listeners right now. Get 10% off your first month of Blue Chew Gold with the code HOUSECALL. That's promo code HOUSECALL. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information, and we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring this podcast. One more time, BlueChew.com, promo code HOUSECALL for 10% off your first month of Blue Chew Gold. Go get it right now. Your girl will love it.
Hey guys, I'm Jack Murphy here at the Team House, and today I want to tell you about the sponsor for tonight's show, Mars Men. This is a natural testosterone support supplement. I take it, I've been taking it for about the last 5 weeks now, and I'm starting to notice a difference. You take 5 of these pills each day, and each one of these cans lasts you a month. I think you need to use them for a couple months to get the full effect of them, but I'm about 5 weeks in and I'm starting to notice a difference already. Increased energy, better performance in the gym, all of those things. I've, quite frankly, in the past, had a problem with testosterone, as a lot of military veterans do, as a lot of men who are going into their 40s do. And this is actually something that seems to be helping me get my levels back up even higher. So I'd highly recommend checking them out. It has 8 different substances in it that help boost your testosterone count. If you guys will go and check them out, we'd really appreciate it. So would the sponsor. For a limited time, our listeners get 50% off for life, plus free shipping and 3 free gifts at mengotomars.com. That's mengotomars.com for 50% off and 3 free gifts when you check out. After you purchase, they will ask you where you heard about them. Please show support for the show and tell them that the Team House sent you. Thank you, everyone. You talked a little bit about how, once we removed the Saddam regime, it was like this entire criminal element kind of comes bubbling up. What was, the next, couple weeks like for you and your platoon?
Really chaotic, really chaotic. So we had kind of, we were hooched up in this, been like a country club, I guess, for the senior Baptists right there on the river, kind of a Gucci place. I mean, obviously it had no power or anything. A lot of it had been
swimming pools and stuff.
Did have, yeah, I had a big drained swimming pool that was like indoor, that I remember the like our human exploitation team guys that were assigned to us, they used that. They had it was kind of like Bond villain style. They had some like Krieg lights set up in the deep end of the pool, and they would use that. That's what they would interrogate guys in there. So anytime we go snatch baddies off the street and like toss them in there, they go spend some time in the deep end of the pool getting sweated. But yeah, so we were huge up there, and we were really kind of like waiting on word. I mean, the general thing was like, hey, make sure that like just try to keep the violence to a minimum. Like, don't let these people shoot each other. Try to keep the looting under control as much as possible. They were still trying to kind of wrangle a few. This was before the CPA, right? So there was no debathification order or anything like that. So we were still trying to find guys, that we could use. Like, hey, you guys have got the kind of the professional background and potentially a little bit of wasta left with whoever might be remaining to try to get them to cooperate with us, just to try to keep the civil unrest like in check. But really, at that time, being first lieutenant, like platoon commander, a lot of like the big decisions on like how that was going to proceed were way above my pay grade at that point. So it was mainly just like go out and patrol our little sector of the city, which changed quite a bit, and then try not to let them kill each other or commit too many acts of major criminal violence. So that was the gig there for a while. Actually, for the rest of our time in Baghdad before we got reassigned down south to Najaf. But yeah, it was wild. It was like I say, for a few days we were teamed up with some of the Baghdad policemen, but then they kind of just disappeared. Sure, a lot of those guys, a couple of them were probably regime affiliated dudes that saw the writing on the wall. We gotta get the hell out of here. Yeah, exactly. So they all kind of dissolved away, and and then at that point we were just, again, it was just kind of like patrol indefinitely and try to figure it out. Although I do remember, and I've asked I've asked my former company commander, who's now a general officer in the Marine Corps, about this, and he doesn't remember this. So again, maybe it didn't happen, but I swear to God, when we were brought back in one time to we'd just come back from a patrol, we brought the vehicles back into the Bathurst Country Club place where we were hooched up, and he said, hey, we just got like a frago to get ready to move on to Syria, like going all the way to Damascus. We're like, holy shit. Like, we just got here. And now we really are kind of running out of gear and everything. So it's like, that's going to be a tall order. So, and I've had a couple of people confirm that were there. They're like, yeah, I remember that. Like they literally thought that there was a frag to, hey, there was like a warlord essentially, like be prepared to,
dude, that's crazy.
To move in, to go, head out west and go into Syria. Obviously that didn't happen. And then it kind of turned into, and then there was this kind of like weird lull, I would say. So like the first couple of days in Baghdad, heavy fighting. Yeah. Then it kind of transitioned to like the looting and just kind of, criminal shit everywhere. And then there was a little bit of a lull there towards the end where things weren't too bad. I mean, nothing good was happening, but like the actual violence had kind of subsided. And that was probably when the last vestiges of the regime were, like, we got to get the hell out of here. And there, there was just less targets of opportunity for people that were looking for some get back.
Yeah, and it takes the bad guys some time to start to organize and plan and all that.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. And then about that time, so I guess this was maybe like late April, early May, that's when we got reassigned down to Najaf, which was like a whole, separate ball of wax with the holiest city in Shia'dom and all, kind of dealing with the fallout of all that. But so we went down there, and actually Najaf was supposed to be kind of the template, right? So we had spent most of late May and June prepping kind of the population down there for like, hey, you guys are gonna have elections in July. This is gonna be the first, you're gonna elect a new mayor, because there had been like a Sunni guy, former IAS guy, Mukhabarat dude, that was like the kind of the interim mayor. Obviously, all the Shia in Najaf hated that dude. They didn't want, he's got to go. So Najaf was going to be the test bed for the first like democratic elections, free and fair elections in Iraq. And so we literally had Marines out there teaching like, civics 101 classes to the population, to the kind of the professional, to the intelligentsia there in Najaf. Most of whom were like hardcore Iranian aligned, like Shia clerics and stuff. But at the time we didn't really know that.
You have like some E5 who has a college degree, and you're like, he's there like pointing.
Totally. Like I'm just a bill up on Capitol Hill. Like it was literally like to that degree of like trying to walk them through that piece. And it was great. And that was like when Sistani came back from Iran and like all, so it was just chaos. But then literally because I still had it in my little platoon commander's notebook. I think it's like July 3rd, 2003. There was only one notation and it just said, we're fucked. Because this guy, Mike Gefeller, who was Coalition Provisional Authority, Shia expert or whatever, he flew down from Baghdad to Najaf. He lived down there and basically told, and we were like 2 days out. The elections were literally supposed to happen, I think, on the 5th or 6th, like 2 to 3 days out from the elections. And he said, hey, elections are off. We don't know who's going to win. It's too dangerous. We can't be promoting some of these guys in positions of power that we're going to regret down the line, which was probably true. But it's like, hey, asshole, like, we've been building these guys up like for the past, month, 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And now 2 days before the election, and of course he just hops on the bird and he's back in Baghdad. We're the ones left holding the bag. Like, now we're gonna go tell a pissed off Shia population that like, oh yeah, remember that thing we talked about elections? Like, yeah, that's off. Like,
remember that democracy thing we talked about?
Yeah.
Like,
Not so much. So,
how did they respond to that?
Not great, not great. There was because actually Najaf was pretty calm by that point. We were still doing crazy, snatching guys in the middle of the night and stuff. Some of the dudes that we had that were actually targeted guys that by that point we kind of figured out who was dudes. Some Ba'athist guys. There were some like Bader Corps dudes that were acting up there. Some of them had actually, had immigrated to Iran and then come back. And they were kind of getting a little uppity, but like for the most part, it was not the same level of kind of like carnage and violence that like Baghdad had been. Right, it started to calm down. But yeah, things did not go great down there, and that was also about the same time. Like every Thursday night, Sadr would come down from Baghdad to a mosque. I don't think he was really invited into Najaf proper, but in Al Kufa, which is like the little town right next to it, right to the east, I think. If I remember correctly, there was a huge mosque there. So he would come down and do like the Friday sermons, like at that mosque, essentially. And so we were, tracking him every weekend. And I still remember my buddy Ryan, like who's 81's platoon commander. He was out one night, because this is like all of us, we were just like rolling around in like, half civilian garb and like just these like shitty old Datsun pickups that we had, that were abandoned or whatever. And like that was kind of the movement. I mean, like again, a lot of times I had didn't even have comms with battalion, but we just go out with like kind of the scout snipers or some other guys and go snatch guys like out of the street. So I was on ops watch back in the COC one night, and my buddy Ryan calls in. He's like, "Hey man, we've got Sadr dead to rights right here. My sniper that's with me, like he can take the shot. He's got this dude. He could actually see him. He was kind of open courtyard in this little building, So of course they run that up the hill, back up to Baghdad.
Also,
comes down like, nope, hands off.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was kind of some exciting moments like that. But it was, for the most part, it was just trying to contain the disappointment of like, hey, sorry, like we told you this was going to happen, and now we got to go back on our promise. So our bad.
I mean, Najaf, I'm probably skipping ahead a couple years, but that place did descend into like total chaos a couple years down the line.
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time. Yeah. Actually, not even that much longer. So that would have been summer of 2003. And then, the big battles kicked off like in spring of 2004. So it wasn't. And how much of that can really be tied back to, our time there? Causation, correlation, who knows?
Yeah.
But obviously it didn't help the fact that we were not able to, kind of come through on our promises for elections. And honestly, by that point, there was, the kind of the Iranian influence was much heavier in Najaf by that time as well. So like I say, Sistani came back. That was in like maybe June or something. And then, and like Sadr was coming down from Baghdad. So there was like a lot of the kind of the Shia rivalry piece that was starting to happen there.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's impossible to say, coulda, woulda, shoulda, right? But if we had a better demobilization or better transition plan, maybe things didn't have to be quite as bad as they got.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, or just not make the promise in the first place, right? Just kind of like, hey, let's take a knee. Everybody just we got to calm down, kind of figure this out.
Yeah, it's going to take us 6 to
Iraqis
12 months to get this shit together. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, they're an extremely, culturally, it's an extremely patient society. Like, they're used to deprivation and having to wait on stuff all the time. So like, if I think that probably would have been the wiser course of action there, is to be like, hey, we're still working on this. Let's figure it out. But starting to make promises like, yeah, in 6 weeks you're going to have elections, and then and then 2 days before the elections, telling them not so much. That didn't go over well.
Anything else notable happen down there in Najaf that you want to get into?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, there was a lot of I just think in contrast of like, the early GWAT, like especially that early part of OF1 just has like such a distinct flavor compared to later on. Because like I say, there was still, it was like me, the other platoon commander, this guy Jimmy, like we would literally just every night just be like talk to the opso, like okay, we got a guy that is suspicious or whatever, like a weapons cache. We got, we're gonna go hit, and literally just jump in civilian vehicles and like cruise out and just go snatch guys. Like I said, like we didn't even have comms like with any of the other battalion, with the battalion staff or anything. We're going out there, and that would have been like unthinkable by the end of 03. Like by the time, so just how quickly like the tactical environment changed, it was wild.
Like you in your book, I don't know if this part's true, but doing an assault from the back of a dump truck.
That was absolutely true. Yeah. and yeah, and I still remember the Marine we had driving. He was just like, wait, like it's like, because he's Mexican, right? Like Latino guy. He's like, well, dude, you're like our stunt Iraqi. Like,
yeah, you're a brown guy.
Yeah, exactly. You blend right in, right? So all the rest of the Marines, and I don't even know where. I can't remember who it was. One of the Lance criminals found this like huge dump truck. Like, hey, we're going to use this thing, and it was like, oh, that's actually like a pretty brilliant plan, because you couldn't the walls on the dump bed were high enough to where like Marines crouched back there, like you couldn't see them. So then we had, the guy that was kind of in Mufti, like driving, and there was this little, we called it Vietnam, that's in my platoon we did, because I couldn't pronounce the name of this like shitty little village that was like south of Najaf. And it looked, it was right on the river there. So it had like a lot of like, kind of lush date palms. It was very green, actually, in stark contrast to the rest of southern Iraq. And we had gotten word there was like a weapons cache down there. And there was, but I mean, again, it was mostly like, old ass infield rifles and stuff that probably mostly being just used for like self-protection, from the carpetbaggers coming in from the north to go steal those guys. But it worked. We got all the way into the village unchallenged, and they were probably thinking like, oh God, like, we're finally getting some civil reconstruction support or something. And then, a bunch of Marines jump out, stick rifles in their face, and basically put the zip tie the entire village together.
One of my this was, I think it was a friend of mine who's in the 82nd during the invasion or shortly thereafter, right in that time frame, they got a hold of a city bus. Nice. And they used that to go and do raids. They'd like get the platoon, just load them up on the bus. And he told me the story of one time how there's an Iraqi waiting at the bus stop, just patiently sitting there waiting. And they're like, fuck it, why not? And they stop and pick him up. And the guy gets on and like sits down and starts looking around at all these soldiers. It's like, holy fuck. he shot off the first chance he got out of there.
Oh man, that's great. Those are the ones, like I say, like those are the stories that because after 20 years of GWAT, everybody hears just like the horror stories of how it was later, right? But you don't realize like on how much we were able to kind of get away with, how freewheeling and just kind of chaotic it was in the early days, where you could actually have shit like that go down and nobody blink an eye. And you
captured that so well in the book, I thought, actually better than I've probably seen in any other, book or film or anything. Just like the sheer amount of chaos and mayhem that went down in Iraq in those early years. And how you're sort of experiencing that as a platoon leader, where it's like, oh, go on this mission, halfway out there, oh no, actually we need you to go and do this, and you come back and you have no idea what the fuck's going on, and then they task you to go do some other shit at another far out location, mission that just comes out of nowhere, and you haven't slept in 2 days, and you're like lighting up your 30th cigarette. I mean, all of that kind of stuff is like, I thought you really captured that well in the book.
Well, I appreciate that, man. Yeah, that's great to hear. Again, obviously, that's kind of it seems a little absurdist almost at this, like looking back 25 years later or whatever, like looking back on it.
Yeah.
It's like, that just doesn't really compute with like kind of our version of
reality.
of how Iraq or Afghanistan or any of that played out later on. But it really was, and I think trying to capture like the humor of it as well, because I think that the gallows, my pops had always told me from day one, he's like, every day in the Marine Corps is not going to be fun, but most of them are funny, especially in combat. And if you maintain that mindset, and Marines are just, like soldiers, whatever, just servicemen in general are just like hilarious creatures, especially when you're talking, I think the average age of my platoon was probably like 19 and a half or 20.
Yeah.
So super young, and just like no, reptilian brain, like no filter, just like all frontal, just like everything coming straight out the mouth. And really kind of like, one thing that I think does kind of change in service culture is some of the kind of the slang and the cadence of the way they talk, right? So like, especially at that, and this is the best way I've been able to describe it to date, is like in those early days in OIF, like a lot of the Marines kind of talked like a cross between like a mid 1990s like LA gangbanger and like a late 40s private eye. It was just like really weird, of like different influences and stuff. So I think a lot of them growing up on like gangster rap culture and like Tarantino movies and just like all this weird shit, and then mixed with like the kind of the military jargon. Like it just had this like strange patois, like really hilarious like slang and stuff that they would use. And I was always joke about that. Like they literally would have like a different way of saying of like how to kill somebody for like every letter of the alphabet, like they would just have like a different word for it like all the time. And it was pretty hilarious. Like watching them try to kind of like one up each other.
Yeah. The way you
on the gallows humor.
The way you describe it in the book, I mean, it's funny because the platoon, like they almost talk like they're gangsters or something. Like they're another street gang out there. Like, yeah, we're gonna go, ace this guy.
Yeah. Like I say, they literally like aced, bumped, clipped, dumped, flamed, greased. Whatever. Like they literally had like one for like every letter of the alphabet, and it would mix them up a lot. And honestly, I don't know if it was like an inside thing to see who like could sound the coolest, but. Those guys were the main character of their own movie for sure. And it just provided, it was like a gold mine. Like, like my only really regret is I didn't really write down as much. I didn't journal or anything like that while I was over there. We're pretty busy. So I probably missed a lot of it that I just don't remember. But some of that stuff that just stood out in my mind was just absolutely hilarious.
Any funny ones that you want to highlight?
Oh God, there's so many. Like I remember, well, actually, we'll rewind to the day. So like we were still in Kuwait, right? Like right before the night before the invasion, my platoon, we were actually up. Technically, we crossed into like the DMZ part of Iraq. We were providing security for a SIGINT detachment that was doing like some sort of SIGINT op against Safwan Hill, which was that hill that kind of looked out over the border there in Iraq. They were worried about whoever was, whatever Iraqi forces were up there. They were trying to paint a picture of on the electromagnetic spectrum of what the hell was going on down there. So we were actually up there. We get the call over the battalion TAC, like, hey, come back after they had just wrapped up, and we're like, interesting. Cause we were supposed to be up there for another couple of hours or whatever. So we roll back, and my company commander, who again, now is a general officer of the Marine Corps, absolutely phenomenal leader, gives us like this like rah-rah speech, like we're going to war. Right. I could tell he'd like rehearsed this one for a while. Right. And it was a damn good speech. Like I was fired up, like absolutely ready to follow this guy into hell. So he gives the whole speech and the room is silent. And then my buddy Jimmy, who was the other platoon commander, he just raises, he's like, sir, so does that mean Anne Margaret's not coming? From Full Metal Jacket. And like, and even the company commander just like absolutely dying laughing, from the very beginning, just like, oh my God. Like just the one time we're trying to get everybody locked in and try to maintain some bearing. And then it's gotta be that guy. So
yeah, somebody's gonna say play ball from the bleachers back there. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was just so many of those. Like I say, like that's my greatest regret is just like it's just not written down more of it when I had the chance to hear it, fresh from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Well, the other thing is, I mean, you're like in your mid-20s yourself. What's it like trying to control, 35, 40, 18, 19-year-old Marines in an environment like that?
Well, fortunately, and what was crazy is like I didn't even have a platoon sergeant. So normally you'd have the staff sergeant as like the platoon. Because of a host of different reasons, our staff sergeant wasn't with us by the time we got into Kuwait and then into Iraq. So
there's a
literally,
involved, I take it.
What's that?
There's a Gomar involved, I take it.
Yeah. Yeah, there was I mean, just a bunch of reasons why he was moved to a different billet. But so essentially, like, my de facto platoon sergeant was like a 20-year-old corporal, was one of the vehicle commanders. That was, I mean, I was blessed. Like, obviously, the Marine Corps really harps on junior NCO leadership.
Yeah.
And by the time I had come to that platoon, those guys were already like locked on. So it wasn't super hard in that sense, as far as, like, at least I had guys that knew the gig. They were technically and tactically super proficient, so the youngins would never like try to second guess them or anything. They had the street cred to pull it off, and I think we had a pretty good relationship where, like, if there was an order that I had to give that maybe didn't make sense or something, that we could kind of communicate that, like, not in front of the boys, but like off to the side, and maybe try to explain a little better, so that, like, help me help you to kind of sell this thing on, like, what it is we're doing. But again, and most of the Marines didn't care. They just wanted to go out, get trigger time. Like, hey, we're just going to patrol around all day, kind of like or go post up somewhere like a tethered goat and, like, hope someone shoots at us. Like, that's fine, as long as, like, we're allowed to return fire. And so it wasn't hard to keep them motivated. The hardest part is, like, by the midsummer there in 2003, when it's just like 120 degrees and there's not a lot of action. Like, that's when it gets much tougher.
So yeah,
they were great. I was dealt a really stellar hand with, and I was actually even allowed to bring a couple Marines over from my rifle platoon in Suicide Charlie that came with me to the Cap platoon, which was good. And there's a couple of them in there that's like, well, you're an absolute, like, libo risk, nightmare in garrison, but, like, if the Humvee breaks down, I can strap it to you and you can just, like, pull it, they had other skills. So, and that all worked out really well. I had Marines there that were, like, again, like the kind of the epitome of the terminal lance, right? They were never going to become NCOs, or never be corporals or whatever, but we'd see them make the most, dropping dudes at, like, crazy distances offhand, like, running, just, like, the actual combat skills were really on point. So it was a good place to have them.
Yeah, bunch of dudes that want to mix it up with some bad actors.
Yeah.
And so how long were you in your platoon in Iraq during that whole pump for the invasion?
Yeah, so we were there. So I actually went back home on advanced party. So I actually gave up the Cap platoon while we were still in Najaf, like at the end of July, maybe. I became like the S3 Alpha or Zulu, like the battalion ops. I was like his deputy or whatever. So I was working in the ops shop there for another couple of weeks. And then they're like, hey, we're going to go back, but the battalion's coming back to Iraq early next year. So we need someone to go back to start the training program to do, already start like the PTP process of like getting everybody ready to go. So I actually went back advanced party. So I left, I think it was either late July or early August. So yeah, so we got to Kuwait in January. So that'd have been 6-7 months.
Yeah.
On that whole time.
Okay.
So obviously, it felt like a lifetime. But then the battalion got extended and they didn't come back until I think October. So I was back in 29 Palms for 2.5 months before they got back.
Did you go back early and all that happened is like the protagonist in your book because you were getting out of the Marine Corps?
Yeah. I kind of hinted to the fact that I don't want to go recruiting duty. I don't want to do any of that. Kind of the normal like infantry progression. The B billets suck. Like if I could stay in the fleet, I would do that. If I could stay a Cap platoon commander, I just would have done that for like ever. But that's not the game. So I was thinking, I was looking at some other stuff. I was married at the time. My wife was married. She ended up getting accepted to the FBI, so she became an FBI special agent. My ex-wife, and then I knew that was going to be like a complication, right? Like trying to do. It's one thing when you're dual military, but like trying to do DOJ and DOD, trying to figure that out and live in the same places, like probably not going to work. So I went back and got out, and then applied to LAPD, applied to San Diego Police Department, a bunch of trying to figure out like where she was going to get stationed as a Fed.
Gotcha.
I tell this story all the time. Like, thank God I didn't get picked up I actually did get a conditional letter of acceptance from LAPD, but ended up leaving Southern California before my academy days started. But then because my ex-wife got stationed up in San Francisco, so I will apply to, say, like an unnamed police department up there, and did some ride-alongs, did all the testing and everything, scored really high, and like I'm all motivated, and I'm fresh back from Iraq at this point, so I'm going out on ride-alongs with these guys, and it was like K9 officer that I was with, right, and like maybe 20 meters out of this police station, he sees this chicken head that's like creeping around on probably like a stolen beach cruiser or whatever. And he's like, hey, watch this. I'm going to jam this guy up. Right. And I was just like, well, okay, cool. But like, do you need probable cause or anything? He's like, nah, you saw him make that right turn without using a hand and arm signal. so he does. So this guy rolls over and, gives this guy the bums rush, essentially, like, don't let me ever catch you like in the city limits again. Like, get the hell out of here. So I'm thinking like, these guys are not playing around, right? This is like a old school, like,
this is like the police department in The Big Lebowski. Get your gold bricking ass the fuck out of our city.
Exactly. So then, like, not 5 minutes later, he gets a radio call. There's like, hey, the marshals have like a fugitive warrant. They just got, one of their sources just said this dude's in the house. Like, they want to go, but they need some local backup. So into the Burger King parking lot, map on the hood. They're like, oh, this is gonna be some good shit. So we're rolling this kind of sketchy part of town. We pull up the guy that I'm riding with, the officer. He's like, hey, I know you're just back from Iraq. He's like, but you can't be in the stack. Like, you can't come into the house with us. And I was like, yeah, no, I got it. I'm a civilian. Like, this is fine. But then he pops the trunk and he's got the Mossberg in there. And he's like, but this is a shitty neighborhood. So anybody tries to jack the ride, like, shoot him. and these guys go into the house, and like, I hear shots, I'm like, holy shit, they just greased this fucking fugitive that they've been trying to serve this warrant on. Comes out, unfortunately, it turns out it was the guy's dog. The fugitive had like a pit bull that he tried to release on the cops, and they had to shoot him. Had to shoot the dog, but they snatched this guy. So anyway, an hour into my very first ride along with this police department, I was like, these guys are not fucking around. Like, this is how it's going to be. Like, okay, cool. So, go through all the rest of my testing. Then I go into like the oral examination room, with like some old ass detective that's on his way out, like a public affairs officer who, I don't think she liked me, from jump. But they start giving me like all these like scenario questions. Let's just say I didn't answer those the way, thinking that like these guys they're testing my loyalty, like, the thin blue line, like I can't be reporting on the rogue dudes that are out there like cracking skulls. So yeah, needless to say, I got the thin envelope in the mail saying thanks but no thanks. We don't want you.
How do we make this bag of money disappear?
Yes. The first scenario question they gave me was the screen test, right? So like, you're with your training officer, and then you pick up some guy for drunken disorderly or whatever, and the guy's like spitting at you through the cage. So he slams on the brake to like smash.
Yeah.
Like, how do you respond? I'm like, well, again, they're testing my loyalty. Like, this guy's my PTO's decorated cop. Like, I don't really want to dime him out for something like that,
You did not understand the exam, man.
Not at all. I did not understand the assignment. And like I say, thank God I was not hired as a cop, because like I had the absolute like wrong headspace, wrong idea of like what went into policing. I thought it was gonna be like every day in Baghdad, just cruising around, like jamming guys up left and right. And obviously that's not the gig. So yeah, it was good. Good that didn't work out. And the stars aligned. I was going through a divorce, so like jumped back in the Marine Corps, and then that's how I transitioned into the intel side, because I kind of missed my company command window, by this point. So it was like, you better find another job. You want to stay in the Marines.
One of the other things I wanted to point out that this book brought it back for me, having like little flashbacks, obviously the whole Iraq experience, but then being like a mid-20s combat veteran back home, addicted to the action, not really giving a fuck about anything, not thinking too hard about anything, certainly not thinking too hard about your future. Basically, if you do something, it's to try to get laid. And like
absolutely.
And like, that is the protagonist in this book. And I was just reading that, and I was like, yeah, like that's exactly what it's like.
So absolutely. And again, like the reptilian brain, just making horrible decisions, like left and right, drinking way too
getting
much,
shit blasted every night. Yeah.
Every night, like, yeah, exactly. And like I said, I was fortunate. Like, I never really personally, I never really struggled too bad with any like lingering PTSD or anything like that. But obviously, when I came back the first time, I was hyper vigilant, right?
Yeah.
Like one, I was just a salty asshole, like, 25, 26 years old. Like, you can't, I've been in combat, like, you fucking poke, like, you have, like, what can you tell me? Again, not the right approach to any of that. And I guess, I'll throw this out there. Like, hopefully the statute of limitations or whatever is expired. Like, I dime myself out on this one, but I think it's a good learning point, right? So when I came back, I was rolling strapped everywhere, like with my personal handgun, like, which in California is a felony. I didn't have no concealed carry permit or nothing, but like, it just felt like horrible to not have a pistol with me, right? So just riding dirty all over California, like, didn't matter, on leave and stuff. Just strapped had the 45 on me, like, at all times. So one day my buddy who was still in the Navy at the time, and I went to college with this guy, craziest head I know, right? Like, this guy, he's wild, man, absolute wild man. We're going surfing, and he sees me like pull the pistol as I'm getting like my towel or wetsuit or whatever out of the backpack. He sees it in there. He's like, "Holy shit, man. Like, what are you doing?" And I explained to it. And then he was the one that kind of talked me off the ledge of like, dude, you can't be, you're going to fuck up your life. Like, you can't be doing that. Like, you can't be rolling around with this, like, illegal concealed pistol. And so it took the craziest dude I knew to tell me that to like realize like, oh yeah, like maybe I should kind of like think through this a little better. And so that, so Bob, if you're listening, man, thanks for the thanks for the sage advice. But yeah, so that, just like that, coming back into the world after that is a lot of bad decisions.
And so it was probably just it was for the best that you came back into the Marine Corps.
Absolutely it was. That was I learned that pretty quick. I actually did get this like corporate gig up in Silicon Valley, like, while my ex-wife was, was okay, like, the FBI agent, you're like a GS 10 step 1 or whatever. I was like, well, we're not gonna be able, we need a little bit of cash to be able to live in the Bay Area, for Christ's sake. So I took a corporate gig up there, hated it. Was just absolutely, like, culturally, and like the very first day, like, I was doing an audit of one of the subcontractors, and I think I called the subcontractor. I told them that their books were an abortion, like, on the VTC, and they were just like, whoa, like, you can't be calling the subcontractor an abortion, like, on the video teleconference. Like, that just doesn't fly. So again, it was just like not a good fit for me to be coming from the Marine Corps, again, like, saltiest first lieutenant in the world, coming back from OIF.
Yeah, in corporate America, they don't really like, they kind of frown on you, telling people like, hey, fuck stick, hey, shit stain, hey, ass fuck. It doesn't go over well.
Exactly. Like, the Marine Corps, like, the military, it's like the last, like, kind of bastion of, like, body shaming and shit. And, like, of course, none of that flies. Like, they don't dig the profanity. Like, there was just like, so I was like, okay, maybe I should go back. I think the Corps is probably the better bet at this point. But it was good, because then I moved on to the intel side, which was good for me, because it kind of really opened my eyes to a lot. I had no idea, even coming to the Marine Corps, like, I knew that there was, like, military intelligence, but I had no idea, like, really what that encapsulated. When I was going through my, basic school and stuff, I was just like, nah, if you're not, like, infantry or, like, some sort of combat arms, like, don't even bother. Like, who cares, But it was good. One, because I wasn't taking care of my body, so, like, physically I was not, like, in the greatest place anyway. So in infantry, like, you always joke, it's like infantry years are like dog years. So, like, biologically, I was 25, 26 or whatever when I got out that first time, but biologically, my body felt like I was like 70. The lingering injuries and the shitty diet and all the inflammation causing foods and the just constant boozing and everything.
The fifth of Jack Daniels, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it was good. And then, like, maybe the intel side, like, my first, not even like as a counterintelligence, human intelligence guy yet, but just as like a general MAGTAP, what we call Marine Air Ground Task Force intelligence officer. Went to Fallujah with 1st Intel Battalion, and started was made the officer in charge of a new cell that was called the EPIC, which is the Economic and Political Intelligence Cell. And we got really, so, like, as a brand new intelligence guy, just come out of the basic, like, the intelligence training pipeline, deployed, 2 months later or whatever to Iraq. It was a really good kind of peek behind that green door of, like, how big intel works. Because, I was working all kinds of interagency stuff. So CIA, Treasury, we did a lot of stuff with Treasury, which was really cool, on the kind of like Project Blood Money stuff. And my first real assignment was kind of getting after a lot of the illegal oil sales out of Beji. So the Beji oil refinery, like they're stealing all kinds of like heavy fuel oil and stuff out there, and then taking it out to Syria and Jordan to sell it on the black market. So, and obviously all that money was coming back to finance kind of the Sunni rebellion. So that was it was challenging in a completely different way that the infantry is, as far as like trying to wrap your mind around.
How did you guys try to interdict some of that stuff?
So again, being the salty infantry guy, like I was coming up with all kinds of plans, trying to pitch to the regiment that was there with us, as far as like Trojan horse ops. Going back to using the dump truck to like cruise into the village. We had drawn up stuff to like basically mock up some oil tankers that we were hoping would get jacked out on that main east-west highway there that's going out towards the Jordanian border, and then like let the bad dudes roll in on it and then just smoke them like when they got close. Of course, they're super high risk type stuff like that, and they're at this point in the war, they're kind of like that's probably not the best approach. So it was hard. It was a lot of interdiction out of the border. So interestingly, my old infantry battalion 1-7 was back in country way out west on the border in Al Qaim at that point. So that was kind of good. I got to go out there and see some of most of the guys I with were already, had already rotated out of that unit, but at least it was cool to see like my old battalion out there. And they did some interdiction stuff at the border that was much more kind of like, customs border patrol type stuff, kind of some like heavier kind of policing action like that. Beji was not in Al Anbar province, so like that was kind of out of the remit of the Marine Corps. So we did some stuff with the Army that had responsibility for that was their area of operations there, where the refinery actually was. And there, I can't remember all the details on some of it. I know we did a few things where there was some like dye marker, like in some of the that they would add to some of the fuel, so that then they could spot it like as it was going through the different checks, which ones that were like if it's legit or not. Because like I think that what it was like they had something, all the actual like legitimate exports that were coming like out of the refinery were being secretly like dyed purple or something. Like I can't remember what color it was, but they had some sort of dye they could use to do that. So at the interim checkpoints, when they would just try to like blend in and take the illegal fuel, HFO and stuff out to the border, they would do like the old dipstick and check it. And if it wasn't the right color, then it was off the books. But of course, then then the bad guys, they had inside people like on both sides, so they figured that out as well. And then it was on to something else. It was just like this kind of constant deal. But it was a lot of that. There was already like a lot of like tons of reconstruction fraud going on at that point on the civil affairs side. So just those huge pallets of like hard currency that were getting flown in to BIAP or whatever, and then
the
Iraqi central bank, and then just melting away like into the gray economy as these like so that was a lot of working with the SIGINT dudes to track a lot of the local contractors that were getting the contracts to rebuild like schools or some sort of utilities like infrastructure, trying to track those guys down so we had firm connections of like between them and what was like Zarqawi associate dudes or whatever, whoever it was that they were kind of jungled up with. And that's then we could get some of the action elements to go and take those guys down. But again, like, almost that entire deployment, for the most part, I was just stuck in this, like in a skiff, right? Like in this windowless box. Like I was just staring at like 7 different computers and trying, so it wasn't like fun in the sense of like, rolling through the streets of Baghdad, jamming guys up. But it was challenging in kind of a different respect. And that was good.
Yeah. The life of an MI officer, as I understand it, like the reality of it, you're not out spying, you're more like in an office briefing.
Yeah. Well, especially as an officer, like I say, in the Marine Corps on the CI human side, that's a little bit different. But again, it's mostly the staff NCOs and the warrant officers that are going to be doing like the really fun stuff.
Yeah.
And by the time I had lap moved, I was already like a mid-grade to like late grade captain. So I was kind of long in the tooth to be allowed, I'm the staff guy that's got to just try to get all that shit approved, which is a completely different gig, but it was good. It was still it was cool to be, in the mix and really trying to advocate. Again, like I say, I think I was joking with you before this, but like a lot of the kind of elicitation and inception skills that I learned, like, as a humaner, like in school, I probably used those more against our higher headquarters to get shit approved than I ever did against the enemy, but yeah, the skill set transfers over.
So then tell us about making the jump over to the CI side.
Yeah. So again, it was completely non-traditional path. Usually in the Marine Corps, on the officer side, the way it works is like you start off in kind of a intel specialty, so like CI Human or SIGINT or whatever, and then you kind of broaden out as you go. I did mine exactly opposite. But I think what was happening was the Marine Corps was losing a lot of like kind of mid-company grade CI Human officers, guys that were doing, because the op tempo was crazy back. This is like 06, so they're, at that point, people are just constantly deployed. So I think a lot of people just got burned out and jumped ship to go do whatever. And then I was kind of, so the Marine Corps decided to do like a one-time thing, like, hey, we're going to take some guys that are already have clearances, they're already intel dudes, and we're going to send them to CI Human School, to do that, kind of cross deck over. So of course I got picked to do that. And I jumped all over it. It's like, hell yeah, I want to go. I'm going to see what this is all about. So I got over there, and the Marine Corps is, again, it's unique in the fact that those two military occupational specialties are blended, right? So it's into one MOS, and it's also unique that MOS school is the only one, I think, in the Marine Corps that's MOS producing where enlisted and officer go together.
Interesting.
So it's, you're in the same cohort. So it's, it's great. It's a great course. You get certified to be, military resource operations. We're CI agents, not special agents. Unlike, in the Army CI side, you have guys that actually have like arrest authority or they're gone to FLETC and do Title 18 authority stuff. So we generally are not. We do have some of our guys do end up going to FLETC if they're going to be assigned to NCIS as like the Marine Special Agent, or there's a couple other billets out there. At least in my time, there were where they would go down. So they're actually 1811s as well. So I was not. I mean, I have I'm CI badge, but I'm just CI agent, and not a special agent. So that's good. And then you also get qualified to be a DoD interrogator as well. So that's and honestly, I think that was the portion. Like the training is really realistic and pretty thorough. It's a long course, and I think the interrogation is usually what cut most of the guys that attrited. Like that was the one that got them, right. So like most people can eventually, they may not be great at it, but they can learn the fundamentals of source handling. They can learn the fundamentals of CI investigations and functional services and all that. But doing the interrogation piece was like, that's when it kind of becomes more like real math, where it's either like it works or it doesn't. You can either, you can write a cohesive interrogation plan and stick to it and like, actually work the approaches and everything, or you can't, and it's, but yeah, so it was good. It was a great educational process. It was good to go through all that. And then I was fortunate that I was able to basically stay in a CI human role as a 2X of some point that in the Marine Corps. That's the kind of the office designator for the staff CI human officer, in some role for the rest of my career. So for like from 2000, by the time I finished that school, it was 2008. So from 2008 to 2022, when I finally hung it up. So it was cool. I got to get exposed to a lot of stuff. Did a year-long deployment to Afghanistan in 2012 to 2013, where I was the 1MEF for the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force Forward G2X, and then concurrently the Regional Command Southwest C2X, that was a great deployment. Got to do, again, at that point, so we had basically all of Helmand Province and Nimruz, like out in the Southwest there. And
was that Sharab?
So we were at the Bastion Leatherneck complex, and then Lashkar Gah was like was the Helmand seat, and then you had like Shindan and stuff to the northwest. So we were I was there on Camp Leatherneck, like where the MEF headquarters was, and that's where like our skiff was and everything. But again, that was another great deployment in the sense of like we got to do a lot of things that probably, because again, like kind of the lack of adult supervision, America was quote unquote kind of starting the withdrawal from Afghanistan, so we were pulling out of a lot of areas down there. So it wasn't like it wasn't the main effort at that point. So which was good and bad, but good in the sense that it allowed us to get a lot of like ops approved that probably would never happen, after that. So I think like I think in the year I was there, we did 8 or 9 human source enabled kinetic strikes using, Hellfires from UAVs, which again, that was at that point, that was 13, 14 years ago. That was a lot, to be able to do in 1 year. Obviously, like agency CIA have been doing that for like a while and everything, but for us we actually had Marines that were out there, getting sources to implant, different tracking devices on bad dudes, and then
cool.
all the coordination effort that goes into that. So it was like we actually had some like real kinetic successes there. On the CI side, a bunch of stuff went down where everything from like local, national, and third country national workers that are working on the base, and terps that go bad, that are working both sides, everything. So yeah, yanking a lot of guys. Basically the incarceration set up there was not great as far as trying to get like any kind of criminal conviction to where like the Afghan courts would actually hold them. But if nothing else, we denied a lot of people that had applied for U.S. visas that are never coming, because they had broke bad at some point. So yeah, it was a challenge. It was like it was just a lot of stuff going on all the time. And then, also having to try to get both, the US 4A, it's like our higher headquarters back in Kabul, to like sign off on all that stuff. But yeah, the Marines did a great job. Like they're, so again, in the Marine Corps, like on the enlisted side, you have to lat move into CI human. So those guys all come from other MOSs, right? They've already been, so they're older and like kind of more mature and more experienced and stuff. So they come from other MOSs. And so like, some of the best ones I had were like guys that come from like the Marine band and stuff, so it's just like, but they found, they kind of found their niche and doing
they're motivated.
So, yeah, exactly. So again, I was like, I had great dudes out there. My CI coordinating authority, awesome. Both my human operations guys, my opsos on the Hawk side, were really good. So yeah, again, I got dealt a good hand, and I was working for a 2 that was like probably, he's probably one of the best intel officers the Marine Corps has ever produced. Super smart guy, and let me get, he really gave me a lot of rope to where I almost hang myself, but not quite. With some of the stuff they let us get away with out there. So that was another good deployment.
Any specific capers that you want to detail from that time in your life?
There was one. So we had, and again, this is like the one when I tell guys that are CIA or even some of the DIA humaners and stuff, they can't believe this would happen. But so we actually we ended up wounding the guy. We didn't kill him, unfortunately, but so we actually but we got the targeting board to approve hitting a recruited asset. So this guy had been on the books forever. Again, U.S. forces are kind of like withdrawing from some of the hinterlands. This dude was operating down south towards the PAC border, and he'd been on the books forever. And we had gotten some indications from doing some of the CI review. He was failing some ops tests, and then he did some CI reviews. Like, yeah, this dude is definitely not on the up and up, and things are getting worse. And so that's where I had to make the decision, like, okay, do we, go ahead and dump him and drop the burn notice, or do we keep him in play? And because the way it works is because of like what you can actually do, and I probably can't get into the specifics of it because it might be classified, but like what you can do with people that are actually recruited assets, vice a developmental source that you haven't actually, pitched and dropped the fig leaf to yet, varies quite a bit. So made the decision, hey, let's keep this guy in the books because, he may come in handy. And the Marines that made that case to me, I was like, yeah, that actually sounds like a good plan. Like, let's do that. And sure enough, it did. So we get word later on that this, bad guy that's down, he had actually fled down into Pakistan, had sent some sodium cyanide, and they were going to basically poison the well of an Afghan army outpost that was down south down there, and try to kill all the Afghan army dudes. And so we used our, bad guy source. Essentially, he was going to be the courier. So when he grabbed, so we had the, DIA flew out these chemists. So we had a recruited asset that was, good to go, that we did trust. He was able to intercept the actual poison, we held it for a couple hours, flew some DIA chemists down there. They sampled it. Yep, that's, it's sodium cyanide, it's poison. It's going to kill them. If it gets in the water supply, those guys are fucked, right? So then we used the asset to be able to push it to the bad guy to be the courier that was going to take that up to the Afghan army base. So then, so we get and obviously got the guy tagged and everything. So we're telling them like, hey, this is one time when you guys, talking to the folks that are in control of the fires on this one, right? Like, you absolutely cannot miss, because if this guy lives through this thing, then he's going to know the gig is up, right? Like, how do they know that, like, and then we don't know what's going to happen. And it was a placebo, right? Like, we obviously didn't let that guy like roll away from the meat with like the actual poison, but then he would find out eventually, right? So it's like, he absolutely has to die on this. Like, it can't be. Sure enough, what happens, like, the Hellfire is off the rail, and at the last second, this civilian vehicle, like, the dude was on a motorcycle, and it was like coming into so they had to do, I think they call it like a cold shift, or like, I don't know what the UAV guys call it, but like, where they basically had to try to divert the Hellfire at the last minute. So it blows up. Dude's wounded, but not dead. We're just like, oh God, how are we going to explain this one, right? And so fortunately we had dispatched, there were some Marines, I think there was a scout sniper team that was at like one of those outposts. They run out there like with some of the Afghan army guys, like, oh, what happened? And the thing was like, hey, tell this guy he just hit an IED on the road. And I think you could still, even from the pred feed, you could still see there was like debris from the Hellfire, like the fins and shit.
Yeah.
It was obvious that wasn't what happened, but for the time we were able to convince them that that's what went down. So that was again, it was like the one time we really needed it to work. We're like, hey, this guy cannot survive this strike, and of course he does. And then to come to find out, that civilian vehicle that was coming into the picture was the dude's family.
Oh,
they were coming. They just happened to be coming back at that same time.
So what became of that guy?
At the end of the day, what's that?
What became of that guy?
I think he died a little bit after. So he lived through the strike, but he was pretty fucked up. Like, he required a bunch of, medical attention. And then, so he was, dead to us at that point, slithered into whatever cave he was going to like try to, I think he may have even gone back down, across the border back into Pakistan to get some medical attention. If I remember, I can't remember all the details, but he was combat ineffective after that. So he did live. Fortunately in the strike, the placebo poison was never recovered. So that went away. So like the guy the mastermind back in Pakistan that was tasking him to do all this, never, he just thought the guy got blown up and his poison was destroyed in the act. So it worked, but it was just, again, one of those things where like, oh my God, like, it was pins and needles there for a while, but fortunately prevented them from poisoning that Afghan army platoon out of that combat outpost down there, down south, which would have been bad news.
The webs we weave.
Yeah.
And then you had some visibility on the Camp Bastion attack also.
Yeah. So that one, again, man, this was rough. So that, in September of 2012, there has guys that breached the outer perimeter of Bastion of the airfield, and essentially took out an entire Harrier squadron, a U.S. Marine Corps Harrier squadron, to include one of their NCOs was killed, and the squadron commander was killed in that attack, basically trying to defend against it. Horrible, right? And there had been what made it worse was there was a lot of indicators this was coming, and we had been trying to raise the flag. But the problem was Bastion Airfield, the Brits had security responsibility for it, right? And they were, on their counterintelligence side, are much more hamstrung as far as what they can do with local nationals or third country nationals that have access to the base. What they can do with, there was like a little village that was kind of attached to the perimeter fence of the airfield. That's where the actual, that was like the staging area that the bad guys used, to make the breach and come in and start blowing up planes and killing Marines. And we had a lot of indications for months before this that things were bad. And there were some other events too. Back in, I think it was like maybe March of that year, so maybe 6 months before, the U.S. Secretary of Defense was coming out to do like a visit there, landed at Bastion, and as the plane was like taxiing, one of the local contractors on Bastion basically drove out to try to enter, like in one of the in the worker vehicles they had there on the camp, and like lit himself on fire. To like, we still don't to this day. I mean, he died before we could interrogate him, so we don't know really what the motivation was. But again, that was another, you know, major force protection lapse, right? This like flaming dude like driving out to like hit the plane that the United States Secretary of Defense is sitting in. Not a good look, right? So that was the first time we went to the Brits like, hey guys, like we've got to do something on this side. And they agree, you know, and I'm not trying to like throw shade on our Brit counterparts, like the CI guys and stuff that we were working with them were all about it. But they were seriously hamstrung from like a regulatory and like a rules and regulations standpoint of like what they could do, because a lot of those folks were basically given the same like civil liberties protections that like a UK citizen would have, right? So as far as what they were allowed to do to collect against them, to provide all the indications and warnings of something like that popping off again, they were hamstrung, not able to do it, which was bad. So fast forward to September, when that pops off, and that, you know, absolutely tragic that it happened, because it didn't need to, and we had been shooting warnings up the whole time. But basically by the time they go up to, you know, all the way up to Kabul, when it was time to make decisions on, okay, well, like, how are we going to change the like actual functional relationship between the US and the UK on that? You know, nothing ever really came of it. So we didn't make any traction. This was like, you know, just beating our heads against the wall for, you know, almost 6 months at this point of like, hey, we need to make some structural and authority changes on how we do this. So that happened. And then the gloves did kind of come off finally right in the aftermath. But I mean, again, it's like at this, you know, the squadron's already been destroyed at this point. It's too late. But yeah, we were able to actually, to long story short, the father of the guy that facilitated the attackers' breach into the airfield, we were able to pick him up a couple of days later in Shorbak, actually, like, which is the Afghan camp that's on the other side. And that was another kind of, again, looking back on it, I mean, it was a tragic situation that it came to that, but the actual act was, you know, basically it set up like a ruse, incentivized him with like a payout for some information that he thought he was kind of like double dealing, and then just like threw him in the Land Cruiser, drove him back. So as soon as he got in and he got slammed down, and then like the flexi cuffs came on, you know, it's like, oh, 10 years of friendship and cooperation, and this is how you treat me, you know. So, and then I think he realized real quick when there, you know, it was a really silent ride all the way back to the detention facility. You realized then that the gig was up, and you know, he was fucked. But yeah, it was just like the fact that it took something like that to make any of those actual like structural changes, and to loosen some of the authorities of what we needed to do to get after it was horrible. Yeah, that it was heartbreaking.
Was that a like insider threat issue? I know the bad guys like breached the wire, but did they have, you know, trustees inside the camp?
They did. So like I said, there was like this little village that was like basically attached almost to the outer perimeter of Bastion Airfield, and that was, they had so the I think it was 8 guys, 8 or 9 man breach team. I'm trying to remember the details, but so of that, like, we'll just say it's like the enemy squad that ended up breaching the perimeter fence and coming into the airfield. They had a facilitator in that little village, and that was the guy whose father we ended up snatching later, because of course that would have been one of the things, right? Like that dude's son like never left that village. He did about a day and a half before that attack, or about maybe 24 hours before that attack. And that should have been something that, like, had the Brits been allowed to like actually really collect on those dudes, that would have been the anomaly from the baseline. That would have been like, hey, why is this guy leaving all of a sudden? Like, it was, you know, because of his position down there. Like, that would have been, it would have put a lot more focus down there. And, you know, counterfactual, who knows, like, would it have actually prevented it? Not sure. But like, the fact that none of that was even done on the front end, even though we've been begging to do it for months at that point. That's what made it such a tough pill to swallow.
And then coming back from Afghanistan, what was the next stop in your career?
So I came back, and then I found out kind of last minute that I was going to command and staff college. So I went back to, which I didn't want to do. I was trying to work my bolt to, back then DIA still had the operating bases, like the one in LA. I thought, oh, maybe I can, you know, stay in Southern California. They used to always tell my monitor, like, I don't care how many times you deploy me. As as far as like being stationed, like don't send me east of Interstate 5. But for school, like for command and staff, it's like you have to go or you have to get out, you know. So like at that point, you know, I was still shy of my 20. I was like a mid-grade major. I was like, okay. So I went back for command and staff, which actually was a good, you know, it was a good experience. So did that for like 9-10 months, and then got orders out here to Hawaii, where I was the G2X at Marine Forces Pacific, and then eventually transitioned across the street and down the hill to the Indo-PACOM J2X, which is that's where I retired out of. But the gig at Marfor PAC was really great at the time, as far as, because we were the only, so my G2X office there, it was me, the deputy, who's the chief officer 4, and then we had my chief was the master sergeant, and I had 2 assistant chiefs. They were staff sergeants and gunny. So we were the only at the time, we were the only Marine CI humaners on island. So like there was no CI human company. There's one in Okinawa and there's one in California, but there's not one here, right? So it was good in the sense that in addition to doing the normal CI human staff work on the MAR4 staff, we actually got to do all the actual CI human work on island as well, right? In support of the units here. Had a really good working relationship with the NCIS field office here in Honolulu, down at Pearl Harbor. We had a couple of Marine CI human chief warrant officers that were the Marine special agents down there. So they were like our main contact for like all the CI stuff, and to this day, still friends with them. I won't call them out here because they're still in the game, but like great, great dudes. So that relationship worked really well. The FBI office actually moved from downtown Honolulu out into Kapolei, which is like out west, which made it, like, believe it or not, even though it's further distance wise, it made it like an easier drive to get out there. So that facilitated, just in the fact being able to, anytime we're working like counter espionage cases and stuff out here, obviously the Marine Corps, like, we're not what's called the Military Department Counterintelligence Organization. We're not the MDCO, you know, on the CI side. That's NCIS is for the entire Navy, right? For the Department of the Navy. And then the FBI obviously retains jurisdiction for all the, you know, domestic CI stuff. So, but it was good. You know, got to work a lot of the interagency stuff with that. Was on the JTTF stuff with those guys, but it was mostly China focused counter espionage, and a lot of, you know, again, let's just say, what's an elegant way of putting this? Like a lot of, like, you know, old guys that get seduced, that get, you know, honey trapped to start writing point papers and shit like that, and generating a lot of leads that way. But yeah, it was a good working relationship between us and CIS and the FBI. So, and again, it was about, I would say, you know, if I could open up my CI journal from those years, from like say 14 to 17 or 18, it was predominantly about 90% China, I would say. And I take, that's kind of a one China approach. Obviously, there's some Taiwan issues there, like, with guys that, you know, maybe playing for both teams. So yeah, that really ate up a lot of the day, was on the CI. So it was a much more CI heavy focus on that one. And then also, so supporting it for the, all the bilateral and multilateral exercises that the Marines do, like all over the Pacific, right? So every time we had guys, you know, they're going to go do Cobra Gold in Thailand, right? Now, next thing you know, I've got like a list of 150 local national guys that we have to do like full CI vetting on. The whole thing is just like that kind of, anybody that's going to be like a driver or like some sort of facilitate the exercise in some way, you know, that kind of stuff. It requires like a lot of like, a lot of administrative discipline just to kind of wrangle all that stuff, right? Keep your arms around it. But then the actual, you know, leveraging like multi-int efforts to actually, you know, run collection against that to make sure that we're keeping those guys safe while they're out there. And there was definitely some interesting stuff on the human side as well, but less so just because, I mean, there's a lot of like, you know, the overt stuff that we do back in garrison, but there was not as much as there was, say, like, you know, obviously like in a combat zone, like in Afghanistan or Iraq. But the CI piece was real. The threat was persistent. It was a full-time, you know, 24/7, 365 gig. There was, yeah, that's the part, you know, I don't miss having to go run surveillance at like, you know, 2000 on a Saturday night.
Can you tell us about some of those counter espionage cases? As I think, we hear a lot, of course, the United States cannot pry itself free of the Middle East.
Right.
And so we hear a lot of those kinds of stories, but we don't hear so many like the Indo-PACOM espionage stories that are unfolding.
Yeah, there's some that I can talk to that I only had a very peripheral. So the main couple, unfortunately, that I was very, very directly involved in, I can't, because they actually never ended up going to prosecution. And it got turned off. And one of those was just a perfect storm of like, I literally thought we had the feds, like DOJ was ready to like go full on. And that's when it was the day that Comey got fired. when Director Comey got fired, I was like, God damn. So we lost like all our momentum on that one, and it kind of just withered and died on the vine. But yeah, there were some ones. There was a guy named Bishop that was an Army contractor out here that actually, I think he got arrested like the week before I got on island. So there was a bunch of fallout from it. And it was actually, again, one of our Marine special agents down at the NCIS field office that, dropped the bracelets on that guy. And he was another one, got, contractor guy, retired Army, I think, lieutenant colonel, who had basically, again, got seduced, young Chinese girl that was working out East-West Center out here.
She loved him long time.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, exactly. So we've all seen that movie before. Still works. Still happens all surprisingly, still a lot of that going down. Yeah, so he got jammed up. I think that was in 2014, I guess, and I think he's out of prison now. He did like maybe 6-7 years. And there was another guy, Eddie Lynn, who was an NFO, Navy NFO in the P3 or PA squadron.
Yeah,
that basically gave up a bunch of like really classified stuff on that platform as far as some of the maritime surveillance capabilities of it. So he's another one. I think he's out of jail now too, or is about to get released. So he was another one, did maybe 6-7 years. And actually my Marines did have a small role in that one. Again, it was, we were kind of constantly keeping abreast with the NCIS office that was kind of and the FBI that, was obviously leading the charge on that one. But there was a couple like, ruse interviews and stuff like that were set up that our guys got to participate in, which was, gratifying to be able to contribute even in a small way to that one. But yeah, unfortunately, like I said, like the ones that we really tried to, that really in depth, that I was personally involved in, a lot of them are unfortunately still classified because those guys never actually got indicted and never got prosecuted.
Do you ever see, like, I've heard stories from CI guys. There's one that comes to mind. It happened in South Korea in the 1990s where it was a supply guy for the military. He was and he kept wanting to, like, he decided at some point, because he had gambling problems, money problems, women problems, all the typical stuff, he wanted to become a paid spy for the Chinese. And he started like making overtures, like, I can sell you a radio. And like the embassy was kind of like the Chinese embassy, kind of flirting with him just a little bit, but no real traction, it sounded like. But this guy, it's like, he's such a fucking mess inside. He's like going out to bars and telling girls like, I'm a Chinese spy and stuff like this. Like, do you ever see like just really wazoo type shit like that?
Guys would be completely off the reservation. Yeah, we had a few. There was one Marine that was he ethnically Russian, right? Like born in Russia and had like migrated here like in the late 90s or something. Joined up, and that dude went like completely off the rails on the kind of like the white nationalist, like, alt-right, like hard right thing. And again, just crazy shit that he was posting out there, like under his true name, like on social media handles and stuff that were, talking about like, killing minorities and shit like that. So there, every now and then you get ones like that. They're just like, yeah, catch me, not even trying. It's like the dudes with the Born to Lose tattoo going to rob the liquor store, like in a gun that's in their name or whatever, that kind of thing. Not a very sophisticated, CI foe in that sense. But there are some very, China, especially. So when I got back here in 2014, that was, right after she was kind of consolidating like the end of that first really hardcore like counter corruption campaign, because there was like a lot of capital flight like coming out of China, right? And we were tracking a lot of that because it touched. There was a Marine Corps nexus with a lot of like our bases and stations around the thing, especially a lot of stuff in Guam and in the Northern Marianas. When all of a sudden you see like this like kind of shitty ass casino like in in the CNMI out in Guam that's moving more money than like Macau and like Vegas does in a single day. It's like, what the hell, you know, like, what, like crazy stuff like that. Or like, you know, why does Palau have like a 1-to-2 bank to population ratio?
in Micronesia?
Yeah. So, there was all kinds of stuff like that again, we would be tracking, but like for us to get involved, there has to be some, nexus back to the Marine Corps for it to be appeased. But because we had folks that were constantly out for all these different multilateral exercises and engagements and everything with all these, foreign police forces and foreign militaries and everything, we came into a lot of contact with a lot of those dudes. So like, whether it was like, Chinese 14K triad dudes that were like funneling money through Micronesia, or that were, at the behest of the Chinese Communist Party, or guys that were, trying to bail out that were former like regime heavies that were trying to get the hell out of China with their golden parachute before Xi and his men, jammed them up and, sent them to the re-education camps. Yeah, exactly. So there was a lot of that going on. Obviously just a lot of like, there's a huge like consular presence here, like on Oahu specifically. So a lot of the Indo-Pac nations, have like a diplomatic presence here, which is obviously a platform for a lot of the shenanigans. And then just because like, you have Indo-Pacific Command, and then you have all the service component commands here on island as well. It makes it a very target rich environment for, for foreign intelligence to get after.
What was your perception of the Chinese intelligence threat? I mean, you've talked about it a lot, but from people I've talked to, the interesting thing is that MSS doesn't really send like case officers abroad. They send their surrogates from the mainland or whatever. It's done, at a distance. What was sort of your observations about the persistent nature of the threat, the targets they go after, their methods?
Yeah. So, I mean, before I got back out here, I was kind of like, I'd always heard the whole, like the 1,000 grains of sand approach. Like that was how they didn't actually like expose their case officers to contact in foreign countries. Like they would just kind of like, maybe more of like a very expansive approach, kind of like the old Soviet model of like a bunch of useful idiots, or like, just casual contacts that they would use to like, they may not have access to the crown jewels, but they're building the picture through these 1,000 grains of sand, through all these like low level collection efforts that are going on through, commerce and tourism, et cetera. Just any vector that they could use to get, someone that has some tie back to the PRC to kind of build that collection picture. Right. But definitely. So when I got back here in 14 to 17 for sure, it got more sophisticated than that. And I don't think I can really talk about some of the specifics of why that is, on like kind of the TTP front, and some of the ones that we use to kind of expose some of those more sophisticated efforts. But it did, as far as like actual, at least from the MSS side, seeing case officers out here, I wasn't much of that. But on the military, so when they did the reorganization from the 2PLA to whatever they call them, not MID or whatever, like so basically on their military intelligence side, again, because at that time, we still had like for huge exercises like RIMPAC up until like 2016, China, the PRC still participated in that, right? So you had, whether it was like, Chinese like media platforms that were covering the exercise, or the actual participants themselves, there again, it just increased the scope and a lot more vectors for kind of more sophisticated, more professional, more trained collection operations like against us in that sense. So that was, and now obviously like after the first Trump administration, that the engagement level dropped off quite a bit as far as like what they were formerly, what we would formally train with them. So about in 2017 specific. So I think the last time the PRC participated in like a big one, like Rim Pacific, which is a huge, naval exercise, multilateral naval exercise out here, I think 2016 was the last time. But yeah, they obviously no doubt learned a lot of lessons from some of their successes and failures there that translated in. So yeah, we did see, I guess what I'm trying to say is like the overall trend was they did become more professionalized and a little bit more sophisticated in their approach to into their collection mission, especially here on island on Oahu, than they had been potentially in the past. But but at the same time, there was other things that they maybe a little bit slower on the uptake.
Yeah.
So especially when it came to their own kind of their own operational security, some of that. And again, I'm talking around this because I don't want to get into classified details, but there was definitely there were some signatures that became like pretty apparent. Even just say like on some of the commercial front stuff, right? Like blowing up the same restaurants here time and time again for like, that just stuff like that, that like you would think by that at that point of their journey that as a nation, as an intelligence apparatus, they would have kind of moved beyond that. And especially here, right? Because like the Chinese diaspora on island is enormous. So it's not, and it has been for over 120 years. So it's not, it's not like those opportunities aren't there. And honestly, like, again, I've been out of the game for over 4 years now. So like maybe it has advanced beyond that. But like I said, so we did see advances and increases in sophistication on their collection efforts, but like a lot of the kind of tradecraft and OPSEC stuff, it wasn't a commensurate like parallel development.
They're not like KGB level.
No, not when I was in active duty. No, there was now maybe like on some of the other, like on the cyber side and stuff like that, and other parts that like I had less exposure to maybe. But as far as the traditional foreign intelligence, like their human effort against us was, and I would expand that into some of the kind of the influence operation side of it as well, that was trying to go on was maybe not as sophisticated as you thought it would be, given the level or the types, the construct of the operations they were trying to run, if that makes sense.
It kind of ham-handed.
Right. Not always. Like I said, there was a few that were that kind of caught us by surprise when we finally cottoned on to like what was actually going down. Like, oh yeah, it's pretty slick. But that was more the exception than the rule. There was, unless it was some sort of massive effort to try to distract us with a bunch of like, obvious fuck ups to try to get us, divert the eyes away from what was really going down, which, is possible. So it's hard to, you can't disprove the negative piece on that, but
I mean, I think the interesting part that you said is that the grains of sand approach is kind of over now, and they're moving on to actual intelligence operations.
Like I say, and especially because like most of the stuff we dealt with, because our touch point was with their military intelligence, right, with their military services. So obviously that's more the MI side than the MSS side. That was a big deal. And then also because there was a little bit beyond that, because we have some educational institutions here on island that like the East West Center by UH and we have APCSS out here, which attracts like a lot of, so there was some other stuff that was that just because of like the happenstance of our geography led to a heavier presence, if you will, of Chinese intelligence efforts.
I mean, also, and it pisses me off actually that the Chinese, they see the entire diaspora as being Chinese. There's no such thing as hyphenated American for them. They all see them as members of the Chinese family, so to speak. And what it results in sometimes is actual Americans of Chinese descent being strong-armed by the MSS or PLA or whoever the fuck it is. And I mean, it's kind of horrifying that Americans are being having their civil rights violated by some goon squad that's far away on the other side of the Pacific.
And I mean, especially when you're talking about kind of like the newer diaspora populations that still have familial contacts back in the PRC.
They have family.
It's obviously a huge leverage. That's a huge leverage point that that the Chinese, that the Chi-Coms are not afraid to to put the screws on. So that's that's a real thing for sure. Absolutely. And we saw that out here.
Okay, before we get into your retirement, any other final thoughts or stories you want to tell about your Marine Corps career?
Yeah, I mean, that was like I said, I was really fortunate. I think to kind of see that whole spectrum from being down the platoon level on the infantry side, all the way up to a joint CI unit organization there when I wrapped up at the J2X at INDOPACOM. So no, it was a great ride, great career. I was very, very fortunate to kind of be in the right place at the right time. And a lot of those, and kind of having that front seat to a lot of those big events, whether it was the invasion of Iraq, the kind of the progression of the GWAT as I went through all the Afghanistan days, and then like, oh, the pivot to Pacific, like, oh, maybe not, but now we're gonna pivot back. But just seeing coming, especially getting here, like after she consolidated power and then like really started to kind of up their game a little bit. Yeah, it was a good ride.
And you retired in 2022. And what was the plan for retirement?
Well, so that was the thing. I didn't really have one. so I kind of punted and I went back to school. I did have some jet bill left over because like, I came in when it was like Montgomery, but then you can transition it over to post 9/11. So that was great. Like I had, so I went back to, got a master's in diplomacy and military studies at Hawaii Pacific University, which was actually a great program. And they, my master's thesis was actually on domestic military intelligence operations in the United States from 65 to 75. So leading up to, and it was mostly Army just because like, that was the preponderance of most of the USAC guys that were like running that. But, it looked at kind of the different, whether it was like, hard left guys, anti-war, like all the different kind of threat demographics, and then the actual locating like domestic deployments, right? So like whether it was, Watts in 65 or Detroit in 67, like there is a lot of very hardcore, like concerted military intelligence collection against U.S. citizens in support of those efforts, right? And not to mention, like, I think in this day and age, because we're bombarded with that, right? Whether it's like Marines going into LA or what, there's a lot of like the deep state or what, there's like a lot of static in the media, right? About, and a lot of that, obviously for real, or like most recently with all the deportation stuff with ICE, like there was a lot of like very legitimate, concern and fear about federal government overstepping its bounds and using collection efforts against U.S. persons for sure. But it was refreshing to, I started that program and started that research thesis right, not too long after January 6th, where I was thinking like, oh man, like things are really not going well, right? Like this, we're kind of like losing the narrative. But and maybe this is like the wrong way to look at it, but it was a little bit comforting in the fact that when I really dug into some of those episodes, it made the current situation not seem as bad, if that makes sense. So like I was getting, I found a bunch of like source material on microfiche and stuff, like the actual unit reports from the different like MI battalions and stuff that were actually conducting collection operations against there. And then some of like the, so like in Detroit in 67, like the National Guard ended up firing over 150,000 rounds. Like there was, tank commanders that were putting like heavy machine gun rounds into apartment buildings.
Yeah, that was Mitt Romney's dad, I think, that called them.
Yeah.
And there was the only reason why he didn't ask the president to use the Insurrection Act was because the buildings that were burned to the ground, the owners wouldn't be able to file insurance policies.
First claim, yeah.
Because there's no insurance against insurrection.
Yeah, so like when you this is maybe like a bad, maybe not the right lens to approach it through, but like looking at just the heavy kinetic effort and just how pervasive and invasive military intelligence collections against U.S. persons was back then, it makes me feel and really like kind of the findings of that whole project was before a lot of the legislative fixes that finally came like in the 70s, after kind of Schlesinger report, Irwin Committee, and then eventually Church Pike was more like CIA, not as much military intelligence, but like all that stuff that happened in the 70s to kind of get it back in track. The Army and the DoD and really all the services kind of self-corrected before that happened, which was refreshing to see, right? So, I mean, obviously there's a difference between, kind of regulation and legislation, but some of the DoD directives and stuff that came out because there was finally, after some pretty egregious abuses from time to time, and some that actually technically, if we looked at it now, we'd be like, yeah, it's horrible, but they were in a legal gray area or were legal back then, right? But the Army actually, and the U.S. military, the DoD writ large, self-corrected on a lot of that stuff before they were legislatively mandated to do so, by Congress, which I think that's an inspiring precedent for like, moving forward of like, if we're actually being honest and introspective, as the DoD on roles, missions, authorities, stuff like, or even just triage of resources, right? Like lot of shit going on in the world. Like, do we really need, and you know, that was a big thing in my research. So the guys that were coming back from Vietnam, we have more people on the North America CI desk back at USAC at Fort Holabird than we do like in the entire Vietnam analytical section. Like, you know, it was like a mismatch of like the juice just wasn't worth the squeeze, essentially. So I think in a day of, you know, of constant DoD budget battles and manning and resourcing issues, I think that was refreshing to see that at least, you know, 50 years ago took a hard internal look and actually made some changes that worked. So, you know, probably time for hopefully that same level of introspection, you know, eventually bubbles to the surface. Who knows? But at least there's a historical precedent for it.
Back in the 60s and 70s, did you find that they were spying on a lot of like peacenik hippies?
Yeah. So there was like, I mean, there was a bunch of different kind of groups that were targeted, right? So there was obviously like the anti-war thing, to include like former service members that came back that were then, you know, became hardcore against the war. There was like the no kidding radical left who, especially in the early 70s, went super kinetic with like bombings and
the weathermen,
you know, robberies, armed robberies and shootings and assassinations and stuff. And then like a very real, and I think the one thing that does kind of get maybe downplayed or poo-pooed a little bit is that like, oh, these people, there was never any foreign intelligence connection. This was all like an organic thing. And actually, not so much. Like, start pulling the thread on that. You know, Cuba had like had a very definitive hand in a lot of that movement. Obviously, their Soviet masters in both GRU and KGB had some efforts there. There were some other foreign players there, and kind of the international kind of totalitarian communist world that were providing some very direct like funding and training to a lot of that stuff. So that was interesting because I think a lot of that, you know, it's kind of like there's a lot of like apologizing for that, like, oh no, that, you know, it went too far. Look, we were trying to like find connections where they didn't really exist. And there was probably, and that's probably true in some respects, right? I mean, I think we probably cast a much bigger net. It wasn't a very targeted effort, and a lot of like potentially kind of like, you know, collateral damage, people that got swept up into that didn't need to be. But that doesn't, you know, two things can be true at the same time, right? But there actually also was like very definitive connections between you know, foreign intelligence entities that were directing some of that, funding it, training people, you know, the whole smattering.
What did you go on to do after grad school?
So then I'd always wanted to write the book, right? Like that, but there was a lot of reasons I kept putting it off. Obviously on active duty, don't have a lot of time to do that. But I thought it was a cool story. Again, I grew up reading a lot of like crime novels. That was kind of the genre that I tended to do, James Elroy stuff. I'm like really into all that. So it was the mid-century kind of like rogue cop, you know, criminal conspiracy type thing. I'd always dug that growing up. So like that was what I was trying to, I wanted to write like a military thriller based on my experiences in Iraq, but then kind of like use that as the wrapping around what would be kind of a more traditional like noir crime story. Yeah. That was the approach. But yeah, so obviously, you know, there's a lot of growing up, you know, I was always a huge reader. Always had like a lot of like paperbacks, you know, like take them to the field or whatever, put in the cargo pocket or throw one in the pack. Cause you know how it is when you're like training, there's a lot of like downtime waiting on helos or trucks or waiting on the gouge to figure out like what you're doing next, you know, that kind of thing. So that was kind of my escapism for that. And it got to the point where I was like, okay, you know, I've read enough of them to where like, you know, I may not be able to write one that's as good as like the top 10% of that, but like I know, I kind of know the structure. I know the game enough to where I think I can do this, right? I can transpose this story into like a narrative that I think will, you know, entertain people. So, and plus at the point where I was like, a lot of those books I'd written or that I read that I really enjoyed, there was very few written by authors that were like under like, you know, 40 years of age. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always a few, but like, that was kind of another, I was like, I need to be older, get some more living, make sure like I really can, and being kind of too close to the events in the book wouldn't have been good either. Right. So it was good to have 20 plus years of kind of like hindsight to kind of chew on the story and let it germinate
percolate a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that helped. So then when I was out of grad school, I was like, well, you know, I don't really want to get a real job. I like being able to like, you know, surf in the morning, hang out with my dog. And, you know, my wife had closed up her practice, her medical practice, like in town. And she was like seeing patients like, you know, post COVID, it was like doing the online telehealth stuff. So she was working out of the house. I was like, oh, this is great. You know, we're just we're like real retirees, you know. So I was like, I need to do something that that I can do here. And I was like, now's the time. Like I got to write this thing. So I did, and was fortunate to have some good kind of beta readers that I was able to get early drafts out to. So that so when I finally, and this one went fast because again, I've been kind of brewing on that story for a while.
Yeah,
So like by the time I actually sat down to when I had the first manuscript ready to send out to some of the beta readers, that was like probably less than 100 days, I think. So
that's fast.
Which is, you know, being an author, like, you know, that's a pretty quick, and like none of the follow-ons will ever be anywhere that fast, you know. But because that one, been 20 years of kind of like plotting it out and working it. So so got it out. Had some really good feedback from some people that, you know, I respected and trusted on that side, and then shopped it around. And actually, so Double Dagger was actually the first company, first publisher that I sent the manuscript to. And Phil Halton, the head of the company, he, you know, who was also a former Canadian humaner, cool guy. So, and a great author himself. So he, you know, I kind of cold pitched it to like this, whoever it is on the other end of that email that was screening them. So he sent me an email a couple days later and was like, "Hey, get on my Zoom schedule." So we did that, and you know, a couple days later, I had the book contract.
Awesome.
So it kind of all came together. You hear the horror stories of like trying to go to different, you know, I've had 75 rejection letters, but to be fair, I had also done a lot of like targeted research on who I thought might actually dig it. So I had read some, so like James Stiskel, who I think you guys have had on the Team House before, but anyway, author, you know, former Army SF guy, CIA dude, like he's written a bunch of thrillers, and like he transitioned off of, from a different publisher to Double Dagger. And I was reading one of his books and I was like, oh, this is a different publisher now. Who is this? And then I started researching them, and I was like, oh, you know what? This might be the one. So then I really kind of did a deep dive on who they were publishing and who they're getting after. And I was like, yeah, I think these guys will dig it. And fortunately they did. So
that's cool, man.
That was the book.
Yeah. It all came together. And so, I mean, the plot of the book, much of it we've kind of like touched upon in various ways because you kind of drew out of your own experiences. But to just tell the readers what they're getting into, I mean, as you say, it's kind of wrapped in the war in Iraq, but then the protagonist comes back home and there's this, what is it? Oil for food scandal that has happened and looted money. And it takes on like these classic noir elements. There's a lot of players in the game. It gets very confusing. The protagonist is a flawed man. And of course, mayhem ensues. They end up in Mexico. I mean, what do you want to tell readers or the listeners right now about your book?
Yeah, so that it truly is kind of like a traditional kind of hard-boiled, you know, crime novel that's wrapped in the trappings of, or set up. It uses kind of that narrative device of the war to kickstart it, right? And I needed something that was going to take the story back to LA, right, back to California. So when I thought about that bank robbery that we talked about earlier, that actually happened, that, you know, that was the present form, the guys were trying to breach the bank with the RPGs. You know, months later, it read about a lot of the oil for food skim that had been from the 90s all the way on, where they were getting like huge infusions of hard currency back that the regime was sitting on. And they were actually, you know, using those bank vaults to store a lot of it, right? And then when everything fell there in the spring of 2003, they didn't get all that money out of there. Right. And then so there was kind of a scramble between some of the mid-tier regime guys, like all the heavies all the deck of card guys were taking off and getting out of there. But some of the other guys, I think, saw that opportunity, right? Like they were like kind of the next mid-tier down below, like, hey, get my hands on some of this cash and I can get out to like Jordan or Syria or somewhere and kind of start over and make it happen. But I needed something that brought it all the way back to California. And then so later on, like during that 2006 deployment, we were tracking a lot of Hawalas, right? Like that was like that was a big thing, and trying to map out like what that network looked like, and finding out obviously that there was, you know, they had existed in the U.S. for like a long time, so there was, you know, there's money that was not being observable from kind of international banking that was flowing back and forth between Iraq and the U.S. and specifically in Southern California, because there's a huge Iraqi diaspora there, you know, relative to other parts of the country. Maybe not as much as like, you know, Dearborn, Michigan, or some of these other spots, but like there's quite a few going back to like way before, you know, pre-Ba'athist times. There were. So that kind of connection was already there. So then it was like, how do I get Jim, the protagonist, this young Marine lieutenant, how does he get trapped up in all that, right? And so he does, and without no spoilers, but like he gets drawn back, and he thinks the war's over. His part of the war's over. He's coming back. He's going to get out of the Marine Corps, can put that compartmentalize it all, put it back in the closet, and then he gets drugged back into this caper of trying to exfiltrate all this money, and also some bearer bonds, which I thought was just a fun narrative device. Again, being growing up in the 80s, like all the cool crime movies had some sort of bearer bond aspect. Huge Michael Mann fan, so like that the opening hit there in Heat where they're taking down the armored cars with the bearer bonds. I was like, I need to incorporate that somehow as just like a homage to like that part of pop culture that inspired me. So there's the money that's moving, and honestly the Hawala piece of it is a little bit of a red herring, but then also the bonds that certain Iraqi criminals and their international associates think that this guy Jim might have brought back with him from Iraq, and then the chase is on. Concurrently, there's the revenge angle, right? So he loses a buddy that he ends up becoming pretty close with in Baghdad, and then there is the person he holds responsible for that killing actually ends up he's a Iraqi intelligence officer, actually ends up making his way back into the U.S. illegally, and then down into Mexico. So like that's his chance to finally sate his thirst for revenge for losing his friend.
I thought it was interesting that the protagonist is, partly motivated by justice. He wants some revenge for his buddy that got killed, partly motivated by trying to impress some girls. And
Yes.
then the third one that kind of struck that, someone who wasn't a veteran wouldn't pick up on this, but the other one is he wants the war to mean something.
Absolutely. And I would even add a fourth one in there was just straight compulsion, right? And I think there was a lot
Yes.
of like that, a lot of guys coming back that are like, because I know I definitely experienced that, where I would do shit and be like, this is not in my best interest. This is not a good idea. Like, why did I just do this? Right. And it's because there's a certain, and whether it's, chasing adrenaline highs or from combat or whatever it is. So we all have different, personal reasons for doing that. But yeah, I think that was a big question of like, fuck, was that all worth it? Like what we just went through over there? Like what, obviously like Iraq doesn't seem to be in like a better place. Like what, things were progressively getting worse and worse. So how is a way to kind of, maybe it's the protagonist being able to punt on the big questions of like, even if the actual war isn't worth it, how can I make it personally worth it? Within the confines of my own life and my own kind of like arc as a person. And that was something that I reflected on pretty hard, because I'd had those conversations with my Marines, like when the battalion finally got back and was able to finally sit down, like have a beer with those guys and we're talking about it. It's like, even if politically some of the goalposts shifted and we may not have achieved what we thought we were going in there to do, like you guys still handle business and you still put a lot of really, really bad dudes in the dirt, and that's something you can always, and these guys would have done nothing but like just victimize other people for like the rest of their time on Earth. Right. And you shorten that time considerably by dumping these guys. Right. And that was, so, be proud in that. And I think there was a lot of, I specifically wanted the protagonist not to have like had any like confirmed kills or anything like while he was in Iraq, and then have that lingering over his head, right? Like that there is like, hey, what tangibly did I actually contribute to that mission? And then maybe he gets this opportunity when he finally gets back to California and then down eventually into the wilds of northern Baja.
So the book, again, it's called The Baghdad Shuffle by Josh Bates. Where should people go to find it?
Yeah, the easiest is Amazon. So that's going to be the quickest. Not a lot of in-store distribution in the United States. My publisher's Canadian, and so we don't have a lot of in-store stuff. There are a few independent bookstores that they're carrying it around here. So obviously, if you can go to an independent bookstore in your neighborhood and have them order it, that's great. They can do it as well through their book scan stuff. But if you the quickest way would obviously be just through Amazon.
Yeah. I hope people will go and check it out. I mean, this is, I think I was telling you before the show, but not on air. I don't watch a lot of these GWAT movies. I don't read a lot of the GWAT novels. I read the nonfiction. I have to for my work, and I do enjoy the nonfiction. But when it comes to like the fiction, I always feel like I don't need somebody else to interpret my own experiences and like reflect them back at. Like I don't need to read a book to understand what that was. And sometimes, I can be too critical and I feel like I'm not being fair to the author or to the filmmaker because they are reflecting someone else's experience. It's just not mine. But anyway, that's my own personal hang up with it. So I always have like a hesitancy around some of this sort of material. But when I read this book, I mean, it clicked immediately. I was like, yeah, this is exactly what it's like. And it captures that experience. And it's something that I would recommend like to civilians who don't understand what it was like this is like something you can hand them and they can read in a fictional format. Like this gives you a pretty good picture of what that atmosphere was like back in those days.
Well, I really appreciate that, man. That's like I said, that's great to hear. That's exactly what I was trying to convey with it. I think it was a very unique time, like in the history of America's involvement in the Middle East, as far as like how kind of chaotic and freewheeling it was. And now there's enough distance between it to where like that, like I say, a lot of that stuff can kind of seem unbelievable at times. Right. And that's why, obviously the kind of the hard-boiled style can be like a little bit unpalatable for some people. It's very, very profane and violent and everything. But like, I think that is like a true reflection, of how that actually happened. But at the end of the day, and I don't mean for it to be any kind of like, crazy, existential look at the war, or I'm not making any like political statement with it per se. I mean, a lot of people I think will derive from their own personal experience, especially people who served in Iraq, or who just were American citizens that, endured all that from wherever they were in their lives. But at the end of the day, I also wanted to be like an entertaining story.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I want people to dig it and have fun. Like I say, because I grew up on a lot of like that, the hard-boiled, like hyper-real stuff, where it was like James Ellroy books, Tarantino movies, like all that kind of shit. Like I really dig it, and a lot of times I think I gravitated towards that because the kind of like the hyper-real like vibe kind of more accurately reflected my personal experiences than what like when people were trying to be maybe like overly literary or like not. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but they were trying to. It was like some people take a very personal, heavy approach to it, right? Which I think is good and can be maybe it's cathartic for them, or maybe it's just like that was truly how they see it and they want to get that out. And I get that, and I'm supportive. And there's a lot of those books I really enjoy. But personally, I was like, hey, I want, the main job of the writer is to get the reader to keep reading. And I wanted it. So, there was a lot of reasons for keeping the pacing tight and so maybe like people are a little wittier or a little sharper than they would be in real life. But I think those are trade-offs that are okay. In service of kind of the broader story.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I mean, I don't want to be too hard on any other author, but like a lot of the works of literature that are produced nowadays, like I just can't relate to them. You crack them open. This is why men go to the bookstore and they kind of look around at the fiction and then they waddle off to the history section. Like, there's a, new biography about Churchill.
Totally.
But I think a lot of dudes out there will appreciate this book, and I hope our listeners will go check them out. Do you plan to keep writing? Do you have any other ideas in the back of your mind?
I do. So I'm about 3/4 of the way done with the prequel. So I have a prequel and a sequel plan. And my contract was just for this first one, so I've got to renegotiate all that. And I would actually throw that out there for any of the listeners or anybody that has any advice on it. But I kind of thought maybe doing the prequel next would be the better, because there's a very deliberate cliffhanger at the end of Baghdad Shuffle.
Yes.
So, do you give the readers like the satisfaction of do you give them the resolution in the sequel right away, or do you throw the prequel out there first? And it actually revolves around Jim's stepdad, who's a Marine who is transitioned into a private intelligence gig on the eve of Desert Storm. And It is kind of like it's a mixtape of all my favorite like 80s and 90s conspiracies. We've got like intelligence support activity shit, like Yellow Fruit scandal stuff going down in there, like all the way from there to like Iran Contra to Project Babylon, like
Saddam trying to build
a massive. So it's like I just honestly, like the first draft is maybe a little too expansive in scope, but like that was kind of the idea going into it, is like take all these like little snippets of kind of lesser known conspiracies and criminal capers that went on that are somehow military associated or revolve around Desert Storm. And then like, how do I kind of connect the dots on those, right? So like that's the approach going into it.
That's awesome, man. I love it. Like that period of time, like the 1980s, there's so much crazy shit that went on. And I feel like it's not tapped into by sort of the popular culture. I don't know if it's because it's too recent or there's just not an interest, or I guess in a military context, most people think, well, nothing happened.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Couldn't be further from the truth. Yeah. It was wild. Yeah. A lot of it was inspired by this journalist, Stephen Emerson, back in the late 80s.
Oh yeah.
Secret Warriors.
That's a classic book. People should go out and read that.
Again, I love all that stuff that's like on the periphery, right? Like like the main theme stuff. Like, so that's why I didn't want to like really do like the hunt for WMD or anything in the Baghdad Shuffle, right? That was kind of like the main event, like all that kind of stuff. I like those stories that are on the kind of periphery that or maybe like have less exposure that you really want to get after. And I think that period from like the mid '80s, basically from some of the say like so maybe like Yellow Fruit in like 83, 84, like when that all the way through Iran-Contra and all the lead up all the way through Desert Storm and some of the aftermath of that, even into the mid 90s, especially when Oil for Food kicked off. And that's kind of the connecting dot to Baghdad Shuffle. But I think that stuff is fascinating. And I don't think it's been mined very heavily on the fiction side. But there's a lot of great, source material out there that I think is begging to be dramatized, right? To be turned into that. So.
But and the other thing too is because it's the 80s, you can actually sometimes go and talk to these people. Like they're still around.
True. Yeah, exactly. So or they've written, maybe they may have to drop a couple hundo on Amazon to find like some obscure copy. But some of these people actually wrote, contemporary like memoirs and stuff of their time in it. So there's just a lot of really juicy stuff in there. And again, talk about, just wilding out and like very little adult supervision, like some of the stuff that, especially the Army, like just because of the mission that a lot of those guys were given, like with the ISA things that we were talking about earlier, like, it's wild, absolutely wild. Like what was going on.
There's a book I read a couple years ago. I have it around here somewhere called Commandos. And all about the Contras. It's basically the history of the Contras in Nicaragua.
Oh, nice. Okay.
That's a really good book if you can pick that one up.
I will definitely have to check it out. Yeah. Definitely.
Okay, so there's a prequel in the works, potentially a sequel coming down the line.
Definitely. So I've actually I started writing both at the same time, which again, I do not recommend that for I don't know. Maybe some people's brains can, but I got to the point where like when I was trying to map out the chronologies and the actual events and the connecting tissue between, it got a little cumbersome. So then I got about halfway done with the sequel. I put it aside and then I just focused completely on the prequel. And that's what I've been doing. So it actually the prequel starts in the summer of 1990. In the right before the invasion, right before Iraq.
I'm looking forward to south. It sounds awesome.
Awesome. Well, I will send you one of the arcs and we'll PDF. And
please
give you some feedback on that one.
So the Baghdad Shuffle, folks can go find it on Amazon. Some other stuff in the works. Anything else you want to tell people about? Anywhere that people can go to find you? Are you on social media? Anything else?
Yeah, so Instagram is author Josh Bates, and then on Facebook is the same Josh Bates author and pop up. So those are kind of my two major. I'm not really like on Twitter or X that much or Substack, but I am now just very very recently, just in the last couple of weeks. So I've started co-hosting a podcast called The Green Door with my buddy Randy McPherson, who you actually met. He was the one that hosted that event in Manhattan.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so a former Marine intel officer, buddy of mine, served in Fallujah with him. Great guy, and it's kind of more focused on again like the shtick is like there's all this esoteric knowledge behind these different green doors, right? So from the veterans community or the intelligence community, and then transition into the business world or into something completely different. And it's like how does that work? How do you take kind of those the skills and that experiential base from behind one green door to the next. So really kind of, the intelligence industry and innovation side, and then also some creatives. Cool. So it's fun. It's part of it is an excuse just to talk to folks that we're interested in and hang out with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's up there on Apple podcast on Spotify as well. So the Green Door podcast, if you're into it.
Cool. And we will have links down in the description of this video and the podcast for folks who are listening. They'll be able to go down there and find all of that stuff in the description.
Awesome.
Josh, thanks so much for taking some time out of your day for us. And thanks for
appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks for writing this book. Anything else I didn't cover that you want to hit up before we go?
I think that's probably a wrap. I'll let you guys. I know it's late there on the East Coast.
Yeah,
so
no worries.
you should get off to whatever you're doing.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone who joined us tonight, and we'll see you next time.
All right, thanks, Jack.
Hey everyone, I want to tell you about my new novel, The Most Dangerous Man, out in June. It is a novel about a regimental reconnaissance company soldier who gets kidnapped while he's on a mission to West Africa. And when he wakes up, he finds that he is now being hunted for sport by a group of tech billionaires through the wilds of West Africa. This book is based on stories that I heard over the years about safari guides taking wealthy clients hunting for poachers on game reserves in Africa. I took that and I took a century-old short story, The Most Dangerous Game, and modernized it. And the product is this book, which I think will feel contemporary and resonate with audiences today. Thank you, and please check it out.